Chapter 52 Delphi Oracle. On the nameless plane, countless lives created at this time just had consciousness, and they crawled on the ground under the action of instinct. Humans were created, and all other lives became active. They came into contact with the world for the first time, and then trembled under the pressure unconsciously emitted by the gods in the sky. But no god paid attention to them. At this moment, their eyes were focused on the newly promoted God King and the humans on Earth. Thank you for your help, Your Highness Ryan. Exuding a powerful divine breath, Kronos couldn't control his power for a while. He stared at Ryan for a few seconds, but finally smiled. Thanks to you, humans have been created. This is really a perfect life. I wonder if you plan to take some away so that they can also be seen in the spiritual world? No need, that is not the place for them to stay, and the spiritual world does not welcome the mortals of the world to live for a long time. When they die, their souls will naturally return to my kingdom. Shaking his head, Ryan rejected Kronos' proposal. He glanced at the place where the Earth Mother was, and the gaze from there had not disappeared yet. From the breath, Gaia seemed to have recovered a little, but her current situation was still not optimistic. The remaining great divine power was barely stabilized, but Ryan knew that she could not hold on for long. After all, Typhon, Demeter, and even the future master of the underworld have not been born yet. Okay then. On the side, the God King nodded with regret, but as the place where the gods created, this place should have a name. It will become a holy place for mankind to commemorate the achievements of the gods. Your Highness Ryan, after all, you participated in the creation of humans. Since you don't want humans, why don't you give this place a name? Rain raised his eyebrows slightly. Although he didn't know why Kronos was so keen to get him involved with humans, he didn't intend to refuse. Name. After thinking for a while, Ryan finally said, then let's call it Delphi. The Great Plain of Delphi, the birthplace of the golden human race. Ryan stretched out his hand and gently tapped the void in front of him. The next moment, an invisible force enveloped the land in front of him. The rocks rose, the ancient trees towered, and on the hillside, a temple painted with reliefs and patterns appeared from scratch in front of the gods and humans. In the main hall of the temple, the Lord of the Spirit World, the God King, and the Earth Mother were worshipped together in the center, because these three gave the soul, body, and existence rights to mortals respectively. The rest of the gods who participated in the creation were worshipped on both sides, proving that the life of the mortal world had been blessed by the gods. Of course, Ryan did not create statues of other gods. He only left his own, a three-dimensional symbol that was changing and difficult to describe in words. He had no intention of showing his appearance in the world, and he didn't even intend to leave his name. If mortals intend to worship him, it is better to worship the spirit world itself. The Delphic Oracle, that's its name. As for this mountain, let's call it Parnassus. In later times, there was also a Delphic temple. Apollo obtained the oracle tablet here, possessed the power of prophecy, and killed the giant Python. But now, it probably won't be related to the son of Zeus anymore. The oracle is a place where mortals worship the gods and listen to the gods' will. What a good name. Nodding, Kronos' power poured into the temple, and the statue of the God King also appeared in this magnificent building. Unlike Ryan, his statue showed his appearance without any cover. The God King held a scepter in one hand, and the three gems symbolized the rule of the sky, the sea and the earth. One hand was placed in front of him, as if embracing the whole world. I will also build an oracle at the foot of the sacred mountain. In the future, the part of humanity that belongs to me will listen to my will here. Good idea. Ryan didn't care about Kronos' plan. He planned to leave. But thinking of Kronos' previous gaze on him, Ryan planned to add fuel to the fire of the God King. Let him quickly expand his power. Compared with him in the myth, Kronos, whose origin was taken away by Ryan, is much weaker. Kronos, the creation of humans is over. This is the first generation of humans. Now, I should leave. Space fluctuations emerged. Ryan looked at the humans in front of him and said slowly, "They are the golden humans, the most beautiful, happiest, and most carefree generation of humans. But there must be death after life. When their years are over, The humans of the Silver Age will replace their existence. Silver humans? Hearing this, the God King turned around and asked curiously, "Is this a prophecy? If so, I wonder what the alternation of 2 generations of humans this time represents." "Nothing, to the gods, humans themselves are insignificant." Ryan shook his head. "But I saw that in the era of the Silver humans, war will break out on Earth. The battle of the gods covered the sky, the blood of the gods flowed between the mountains and rivers, and the thrones faced each other." The figure faded slightly, but Ryan's voice still came clearly. Many gods who were born later did not understand the meaning, but the faces of the Titans became solemn. Especially Kronos, although he has never paid attention to the so-called fate for thousands of years, it can be known from the fact that he has not had a child so far that Ryan's prophecy and Uranus' curse have always been on his mind and have never been dispelled. War will break out on Earth. So after the 2nd generation of humans is born, will there be gods to challenge my position? My child? Yes, the world is urging me, I can't delay forever. With an unchanged expression on his face, Kronos gritted his teeth secretly. People are gone, and they still leave him such a message. The God King felt the increased power in his body, but he still didn't feel relieved. Even now, he is nothing in front of Uranus in his prime. Even if he has lost his power and only half of his power is left, he can hardly reach it at this moment. Such power is declining under fate, let alone himself now. 2nd generation of humans? Then there should be no 2nd generation. As long as the humans I created are limited to this, the prophecy can be postponed. I will make full preparations and then calmly break free from the shackles of fate. Kronos made a decision secretly in his heart and felt relieved. Although reason told him that fate was not so easy to fool, it was better to have a direction than nothing. We should also discuss the distribution of human beings. Kronos broke the silence and did not intend to let the gods focus on fate. Hearing this, the gods cast their eyes on the God King. Regardless of whether there were any opinions in the future, it was more reasonable for Kronos to make the initial division. One legislation, one creation of human beings, the new God King finally established basic authority among the gods. He should have been happy, but it was a pity that Ryan's words before leaving made him unhappy. Let's start. Facing the gaze of the gods, Kronos said calmly, "We are a group of 1,000 people, and they can cooperate with each other to survive on the Earth. Every true god present can at least get his share, and as for the rest, they will be arranged according to their respective strength and contribution." The gods nodded one after another. This is chaos, strength always comes before contribution. So in a relatively harmonious atmosphere, in front of the newborn human beings, the gods began to divide up. Chapter 53 Faith. There were about 800,000 humans born, which was much more than in later myths. But considering that chaos in this world is much larger, the Mediterranean Sea may be an oversized island here, so these people don't seem to be many. As the king of gods, Kronos and the gods living on the sacred mountain got the most. They returned to Mount Odylus with 300,000 humans, including the original king of humans. The Lord of the Outer Sea got 150,000 people, and Pontus and Uriah got 100,000 each. The 2 sea gods took humans to the island, which was formed by the fallen celestial bodies and shattered continents when the Father of Heaven and the gods fought. The God of the mountains and the King of gods brought humans back to their birthplace. Of the remaining 200,000 people, Gaia left 100,000 around his residence, and the rest were divided up by the true gods. Some followed the god of skylight to the underworld, and some were taken to a place on the western edge of the continent by the god of celestial bodies. It was the place where the sky and the earth were closest after the first era, and Cuyus asked his 2 daughters to take care of these humans on his behalf. Before leaving, each god who participated in the creation of humans left his image in the Delphi oracle. In the dark, under the power of the gods, the oracle also became extraordinary. The 100,000 humans who followed the Earth Mother lived in the Great Plains around the temple. They built houses in the shape of the oracle and prayed to the gods for food to survive. So the plants that humans could eat grew naturally around them. Every time they picked one, another would grow, and their vines would never wither. The newborn humans were very grateful. They had nothing else to do except eating and resting, so they worshipped the heaven and earth, the sun and the moon and the gods devoutly. At the suggestion of the gods, temples were built one after another. The first generation of golden humans were born strong, with amazing endurance and excellent learning ability. Humans who were taken away by different gods often worshiped different gods as their main objects of sacrifice. They built temples in different styles according to their preferences for serving gods. In this process, perhaps due to the combination of soul and body, coupled with devout worship, a mysterious power was born. The gods noticed it, or they may not have noticed it, because they didn't care about it. Maybe it was too deliberate when creating, and humans in the Golden Age only had positive and beautiful emotions. On this basis, the birth of those mysterious powers also seemed very weak. This weak power may still have some effect on the regional gods. But every god who participated in the creation of humans is a true god, and they obviously don't care about this insignificant existence. Ryan was not surprised by this. At this time, human faith was not strong, because spiritual life was like this. Even because they had no body, the faith they brought to Ryan was even rarer. Perhaps only a life with both wisdom and body, and whose thoughts have not been modified, can give birth to a large number of beliefs. The Zeus of later generations can even break the upper limit of the priesthood with this, making the human priesthood equal to the natural priesthood. Even if it is obtained from faith, it is bound to be limited by faith, but this is terrible enough. With some emotion, Ryan looked at the origin of wine in the spiritual world. Weak. Even if the gods praise it, the so-called god of wine can only be the gatekeeper of the true god with weak divine power. In comparison, the god of wine in later generations even sat on the position of the 12 main gods of Olympus. As long as there is an endless stream of faith, Dionysus will be a powerful god. Ryan only has some guesses about this, but limited to the current few beliefs, he is not very sure. But what he can be sure of is that as the master of spirituality, Chaos was the first to come into contact with the existence of faith. Even he can only prevent the emergence of faith at most, but he cannot forcefully take the faith directed at others as his own. From this, we can see that faith may indeed be inclined towards spirituality, but it is by no means derived from pure spirituality. Moreover, Ryan vaguely discovered that gaining faith does not seem to rely entirely on the so-called devout worship. In other words, the faith gained from simple prayer may only account for a small part of the total, and it fluctuates at any time due to the mood of mortals. After all, even as the creator of spiritual life, there are only a few spirits who can be called devout believers in Ryan. Even the spiritual life that was born later, those who have never seen Ryan's existence, more often regard him as a symbolic existence. They respectfully call him the great ancient spiritual will and believe that he is the world itself without personality and thought. In contrast, spiritual life often worships the spiritual angels that shuttle between different levels. But even so, the faith that Christo and others have gained is still far less than mine. Sure enough, compared to worship, leaving a deep mark in the history of a race, the priesthood itself has extraordinary significance to this race, and even becomes a part of the inheritance of civilization and culture. The faith brought by these behaviors is more meaningful than worship. Just like the spiritual life at this time, although there are not many beliefs in their birth, Ryan can still feel that compared with their unconscious worship of himself, the concept of himself as their creator and the creator of the spiritual world brings much more faith than the former. This time, Ryan also went to verify this conjecture. After all, a single piece of evidence is not enough, and the experience gained from the spiritual life alone may not be suitable for all situations. But now, Ryan can be sure of his thoughts. As the creator of mankind, Ryan can feel that even if no human knows what kind of God he is, there is still faith coming from the collective of mankind. He even has a vague feeling that even if the humans of this era completely disappear in history and no living creature survives, but as long as the traces they left in the world are still there, this kind of faith that does not come from worship will continue. It may be reduced, but it will not disappear completely. This is the intuition that the priesthood of history brings to Ryan. Perhaps this magical power from intelligent life has a special nature that is difficult to erase by time, and it will still last forever even after years. It's amazing. Civilization, faith, life, they are the most elusive things in this world. But if that's the case, Prometheus's fate doesn't seem strange. A prophet who knows first. A latecomer who knows later? It's obviously just a fool who appears wise and a wise man who appears foolish. Recalling his Midas-like operation when the two brothers were born, Ryan saw more deeply the secrets hidden behind the myths of his previous life. As the first two come into contact with bronze humans, the fire thief and his brother may have vaguely discovered the mystery of faith, but in the end, the two made different choices. The three generations of gods also discovered this. Perhaps Pandora's box and the flood that destroyed the world were essentially Zeus's attempts to test the essence of faith. He discovered this weak power at the time and tested it. The result was gratifying. He further supplemented the missing part of the emotion on the basis of bronze humans, and then realized that faith was more than just kneeling. And this is probably the key magic weapon that Zeus used to fight against fate and infinitely delay the birth of the next god king. Even the subsequent Dionysus and the 12 trials of Hercules were just his further exploration of the power of faith. Civilization? It coincides with my original plan. Looking at the still empty third spiritual world and the empty third oracle slate, Ryan finally set his sights on humans. Following the connection between the Lord of Spirituality and the soul, he gently plucked the strings in his hand. So Chaos' first dream was born. Chapter 54 Dream. Time flies and 700 years have passed since humans were created. At the foot of the sacred mountain, another nearly 10-meter-high boulder was moved. Cohen wiped his sweat and looked at another temple that was about to be built in front of him. Tall and majestic, unlike the oracle that was born under the finger of God when it was just born, this is a temple built by the golden humans themselves. Before this, they had built many temples in turn, and each true god on the sacred mountain had his own temple. There are no exquisite reliefs, no mysterious patterns, and no sacred feeling that goes straight to the soul at a glance, but Cohen still feels very satisfied. The symbol of God's power is the symbol of God's power, and the symbol of mortals' piety is the symbol of mortals' piety. The two cannot be confused. King, take a rest. Just as he was about to move a stone, a voice from the side stopped Cohen. Serving the gods, we should not be greedy for comfort. Shaking his head, although Cohen was very tired, he did not feel dissatisfied at all. The humans of the Golden Age gathered all positive emotions. They were upright, kind, hardworking, brave, and had a heartfelt respect for the gods. In their view, doing things for the gods was a matter of course. Moreover, he was the first human created by the Lord of the spirit world, and therefore was named the King of Humans. After the division of the gods was over, he was naturally chosen by the god king and came to the vicinity of Mount Ovals. At this moment, there are more than a dozen tribes of all sizes around the sacred mountain. They nominally belong to the gods on the mountain, but they all obey Cohen's orders. As the leader chosen by the gods, although the king at this time is more of a title without the concept of nobles, officials and countries, he still holds himself to the highest standards. Of course, as the first human, he does have abilities beyond ordinary people. Of course we should work for the gods, but you haven't rested for 7 days. After listening to Cohen's words, the visitor expressed understanding, but still persuaded him. Although Cohen's power is far beyond that of ordinary people as the first human created, he is not a god after all. Even in the original mythology, humans in the Golden Age ascended to heaven after death and became special heroes close to gods. Okay. After hesitating for a while, Cohen was finally convinced. Only with enough energy can one work more efficiently. Proper rest is also essential. Nodding, Cohen said goodbye to the visitor. He walked to a shaded tree and sat down against the trunk. There was no sleep in the chaos world, and the so-called rest of humans was just to stop working. As lives blessed by the gods, they only need to rest for a while, and their energy will soon recover. But this time, as soon as Cohen sat down, an inexplicable trance came over him. He didn't know what this feeling was, so he tried hard to stay awake. However, the power of mortals could not fight against authority after all, and in the end, Cohen leaned against the tree trunk and fell asleep. Darkness. It seemed like he had fallen into an abyss. His mind could not turn, and there was only a cold touch. The concept of time became blurred, as if it was a day, or a second. At a certain moment, Cohen seemed to see a ray of color. Huh? Suddenly awake, Cohen suddenly realized that he was no longer in the original place. At this time, he appeared in front of a tall building. Unlike the stones he had seen before, this building was made of various unknown materials and carved with exquisite patterns and designs. Some of them were engraved with people and some were engraved with things. Although Cohen could not understand the meaning of most of the patterns, he only recognized one, which was a person carving. He had learned carving, but when he saw that picture, Cohen felt that what he had learned in the past was a clumsy joke. May the goddess Themis forgive my usurpation. As soon as this thought came up, Cohen hurriedly prayed in his heart. Before, all the shallow skills of mankind were learned from the goddess of justice, including the construction of temples, the recording of major events, and the carving of statues. In addition, the goddess also helped humans simplify the innate characters that contained extraordinary power and taught them a lot of knowledge. Humans used this to write history and commemorate major events that had occurred. However, although what he saw was much more than what he had learned in the past, Cohen, who reacted quickly, did not think it was God's problem. God would not be wrong. The goddess only taught him those skills, which must be because mortals should only understand these. After praying silently for a while, Cohen began to observe the surroundings again. Although he didn't know where this was, there was no doubt that only God was worthy of living in such a place. Cohen didn't dare to step into God's residence privately, so he looked around. But for some reason, there was a white mist all around, and he seemed to be wrapped in the middle. Only he and the temple were real. Squeak minus minus. The sudden sound made Cohen turn around abruptly. Behind him, I don't know when, the door of the temple opened automatically. Severus Temple, this is the name of this place. Although Cohen didn't recognize any characters, he now knew this. However, facing the unexpected changes, Cohen was relieved. He had confirmed that everything he was experiencing now must be God's will. Great God, if you have guided me here, I will come to see you now. After respectfully worshipping the gate, Cohen carefully stepped over the threshold and walked into the Severus Temple. After passing through the gate, the first thing he saw was a long corridor with a row of pillars on each side. The murals inside the temple were more exquisite, but Cohen did not dare to look at them for too long. He walked forward carefully and quickly, so as not to make the owner of this place wait too long. The corridor was very long, much larger than the temple itself seen from the outside world. Cohen was not sure how long he had walked, and the concept of time seemed to have become blurred. Indistinctly, he seemed to hear a voice coming from afar. Morning, spiritual. Soil. Is it the voice of God? Shocked, Cohen quickly quickened his pace. Whether it was God or not, since he could exist in this mysterious palace, the other party must be related to God. Light, body. Almighty. Put on the crown, surround. Trillions, all in the name of God. As he got closer to the source of the sound, the bites became clearer and clearer. Cohen gradually figured out that this seemed to be a piece of poetry. The great Lord of Law had seen similar things before, so the King of God hoped that mortals could also learn poetry. But unfortunately, although the golden humans have excellent learning ability, they have no creativity at all. This was not something Ryan did deliberately, but no matter how mortals beautify the so-called positive emotions, the creatures with only these alone are still distorted. A distorted soul, not strong enough, naturally cannot carry more things. Moving forward quickly, out of respect for God, Cohen did not run, but his speed was still very fast. At a certain moment, the scenery in front of him finally changed. It was no longer an endless corridor in front of him. Cohen appeared in a wide hall. There was no expected God, only a slender figure covered in a white hood. She sat sideways on the ground, and the previous poem came from under the hood. And now, the sacred singing still resounded, and even as Cohen left the corridor, he felt as if he had crossed an invisible barrier. When he passed through the barrier, he suddenly realized that the previous singing was not in the language he was familiar with, and the short verses contained such power. How can sinners look at the majesty and glory of Allah? Each of them presents a jade crown and gorgeous ornaments, and offers the golden hall of the throne of God. Holy, holy. The seventh moon rises in the west, and the dark and clear sky is forever in the sky. It was there and it is still there, and it will be forever for thousands of years. Chapter 55 Civilization. It seemed that they did not notice the arrival, nor did they seem to care. The sacred poetry still echoed in the hall, but this time, Cohen heard it clearly. It was not the language used by the gods, nor was it the language simplified by humans after listening to the divine language. Cohen had never heard such a tone, beautiful and mysterious, but not like the sound that could be produced by vocal cords. He felt that he was undergoing a baptism, and his soul seemed to become transparent and holy. Faintly, a sense of longing from the heart came. Different from the yearning for beauty, it was more like a desire for completeness. But as a masterpiece of God, Cohen did not know where he was incomplete. May God forgive me. Kneeling on the ground, Cohen prayed devoutly. Although it was the first time he heard it, Cohen easily understood the meaning of the poem of the creature in front of him. She was praising a supreme being. He made July rise from the west mountain and let the spiritual light shine through the underworld. He is a great man who transcends time and is an eternal king. After a while, I don't know how long it took, the empty hall fell silent again as the last bite fell. In the silence, Cohen heard footsteps coming from far away. He raised his head. It was the mysterious existence who chanted poetry before. He had never seen such clothes before. The white robe was woven with unknown things, not like the stems and leaves of plants at all. The hood was slightly drooped, covering the appearance of the visitor. Although Cohen didn't think he had any appreciation ability, he still thought it was better than the clothes of the gods on the sacred mountain. This idea shouldn't have been there, but thinking that the other party might also be related to God, Cohen convinced himself again. God, naturally, can do better than another god. Are you human? A soft and distant voice came from under the hood. It was still the strange language before. Although he had never heard it before, Cohen could understand the meaning. In his feeling, this language seemed not to be heard by his ears, but conveyed to his heart in another way. I am, Your Highness. Cohen respectfully responded to the inquiry in front of him. Although he didn't know whether the other party was a god, he still used the honorific for God. Your Highness, I didn't mean to break in here. Just now, I just wanted to rest minus. I know. The man in white in front of him interrupted Cohen's explanation. You came here through dreams, human. 700 years ago, the Lord brought sleep to the creatures on earth. At first it was plants, then animals, and then you humans. In the end, even the gods will gradually learn to sleep. And you, as the first intelligent life to enter the dream, are allowed to cross the 7 layers of the spirit world and step into the temple of the holy mountain. Minus God will also sleep. He was stunned at first, and then a little horrified. Cohen's attention was completely attracted by the first half of the sentence. He really couldn't imagine that gods would be forced to enter the dream. This was something incomprehensible. It's not what you think. Shaking her head, Evangeline glanced at the mortal in front of her and explained. Just like water, food and breathing, they are an indispensable part of mortals, but gods can choose to accept or reject them, and the same is true for dreams. I understand, thank you for answering my questions. Cohen said respectfully, his emotions calming down a little. God can refuse, which is in line with the simple logic of the golden humans. As for whether the other party lied to him, humans at this time did not know what deception was. I don't know your name yet, Your Highness. I was summoned by God to come here to meet him. When I return to my tribe, I will definitely build a temple for you and your Lord, so that humans can sing praises to your greatness day and night. Cohen did not look up, but he felt that under the white hood a pair of eyes looked at him for a while. I am Evangeline, an angel who sings for the Lord and the embodiment of the music of the spiritual world. As you think, according to the definition of the outside world, I am indeed a god. Shaking her head gently, Evangeline said lightly. But the Lord does not need you to build a temple, nor does he need your faith, and I don't need them either. If you want, then do something for me. Slightly startled, Cohen did not expect to get such an answer. But since God has a request, as a golden human, he will naturally do it as it is. As for not having faith, Cohen accepted it easily. In fact, due to the defects of the golden human soul, the meager power of faith is not noticed by the gods. In this case, some gods do not even want mortals to sacrifice them. Being able to serve you is the meaning of my existence, Your Highness. Just like every time he accepted the oracle in the past, Cohen responded respectfully. Okay, what I want you to do is very simple. Go forward and write down what you can remember, that's all. After the cold voice fell, Evangeline pointed to the stone slab on the central stone platform. Following the direction pointed by the god of music, Cohen clearly saw that in the middle of the hall, there were two sculptures with wings on their backs kneeling on the ground, with their hands raised high, holding up a stone platform together. Above the stone platform, an ancient stone slab was floating there. Between the ups and downs, Cohen vaguely saw that there seemed to be something written on it, but when he looked closely, he couldn't see it clearly. For some reason, Cohen vaguely felt that the faceless god in front of him seemed very similar to the stone statue. If the two beings holding up the stone platform folded their wings and covered their hoods, the figure of the one on the left would be exactly the same as her. As you command, Your Highness. Putting away his thoughts, Cohen stood up and slowly approached the stone platform. At first, he felt as if he was doing useless work, because no matter how close he was, he still couldn't see the content on the stone slab. Time passed by minute, until a certain moment, he finally saw the two symbols on the stone slab. It was a kind of text he had never seen before, changing constantly, swirling up and down. But for some reason, Cohen understood its meaning. Civilized years? The next moment, endless knowledge poured into Cohen's heart, and he almost lost his mind in the torrent of information. Some he could understand, some he couldn't understand, and when these were mixed together, he felt that his soul was about to be torn apart. It seemed like a moment, but it also seemed like a long time had passed. In a trance, Cohen felt himself jumping in a colorful tunnel, and then suddenly woke up from the tree. Subconsciously covering his head, Cohen found that the indoctrination of knowledge had stopped. Unsystematic things were mixed in his mind, but Cohen still found a lot of useful things from it. Civilization, what is it? Silently reciting the words that the stone tablet first printed in his mind, Cohen knew about years, and it was said that it was the great power of the God King and God Queen. But civilization was something he had never heard of. King, what's wrong with you? Nothing, just a little uncomfortable. Cohen's abnormality was seen by passers-by, and in the face of other people's inquiries, Cohen dealt with it casually. Today's experience is really unforgettable for him, but thinking about the knowledge in his mind, maybe that is the treasure given to him by God to spread to all mankind. So Cohen stood up and walked towards the temple under construction. Before, he was shocked by the magnificence and exquisiteness of the temple, and felt that it was the pinnacle of human skills. But now, he felt that he had not done enough. God gave him knowledge, and he would not keep it for himself. He would sort it out one by one and teach it to every golden human. Only skills from God can better serve God. Walking on the road compacted by mud, Cohen was a little excited. However, what he didn't know was that at this moment, the king of the gods who had once given him an oracle to build the temple was watching him on the top of Mount Odylus. From before falling asleep, during falling asleep, and after waking up, the king of gods had been watching him silently. He watched Cohen excitedly tell the humans around him about his previous experiences, teach them all kinds of knowledge, and talk about the mysterious stone slab. Human. So, what do you want? Shaking his head, Kronos turned around and returned to his bedroom. Chapter 56 Sword pointing to the starry sky. On Mount Odysseus, Kronos returned to the palace and waved his hand to dismiss the nymphs standing by. On the day of the creation of man, many plants around the Earth Mother's residence were also baptized by the spiritual breath. They had accumulated enough, but their spiritual power was still weak. Now that the deficiency has been made up, they have taken shape. Nymphs are born of nature. They have no divinity, but they have a long life. The gods like these beautiful elves very much, so they took some back, and Kronos was no exception. This solved the problem that the God King had been worrying about for a long time. He no longer needed to deal with everything personally. Therefore, he slowed down the idea of giving humans divinity. Compared with now, Kronos plans to wait until humans die and then promote those who are valued by him in the name of reward. You should have seen it. Humans have learned to sleep and started to dream. Even the leader of the human race has learned new technology in his dream. He called the thing containing knowledge the civilization slate. It doesn't look like a natural creation. Behind the bedroom, Queen Rhea walked out slowly, her golden skirt dragging on the ground. I know, it's just another plan by some people, but it's a pity that I still don't understand it. Judging from his previous choices, humans themselves are not important. Or, it should be that humans can indirectly achieve his goals. Destiny, it's really a mysterious power. It always allows gods to walk on the most correct path. Shaking his head slightly, Kronos reached out to embrace his sister and sighed. Nyx and Ryan, the only two gods who control destiny, cannot be used by him, otherwise he would not be so troubled. The prophecy of the past and the curse of the father god have never been put down by him, but made him more eager to pursue power. It's good that you know. Nodding, Rhea leaned on her husband. She actually just found an excuse to come here. She had long seen Kronos' attention to Ryan. These humans, especially the first one, had always been under his attention. In this regard, Rhea did not need to remind her. Compared with human affairs, perhaps because of the influence of the position of the Queen of Gods, she wanted to give birth to their son of God with Kronos like her brothers and sisters. But so many years have passed, and out of fear of the prophecy, Kronos has always refused. But this refusal is meaningless. Giving birth to gods is one of the responsibilities given to the King of Gods by the world. Kronos can postpone it in other ways, but it can only be postponed. You say, is there anything special about these humans? Looking down the mountain, Kronos did not notice Rhea's emotions. He was just thinking in his heart. What else he didn't expect? Creating dreams and imparting knowledge, can he get anything from these humans, or is it that humans get knowledge from the Lord of the spirit world itself has any special meaning? Maybe it's just for dreams, or the priesthood corresponding to those knowledge. Rhea guessed. Now, in the entire chaos world, except for the original gods, only the two of them knew that Ryan could devour the source power. Among the other gods, even Hyperion, who suffered a great loss, only thought that it was the power of 2 generations of god kings that allowed Ryan to take away the concept of the moon and shake the divine power of the sun. Maybe, at least dream and sleep are indeed powerful powers. Faintly, I even feel that the gods can also sleep and dream. Nodding, Kronos had no other ideas and had to agree. But he still felt that this was not Ryan's real idea. After all, dreams are fine, and what are those skills? Compared with the power of natural priesthood, humanistic priesthoods such as forging and textile are simply pitifully weak. Except for some use in forging artifacts, they are worthless. Even Kronos knew that existences like the Cyclops, even if they did not have any priesthood, they themselves had the ability to forge artifacts. This was the power they inherited from the Earth Mother. Give civilization time, give time civilization, maybe he is more suitable to be the god of language than mnemosyne. Smiling, Kronos couldn't help but think of the sister who ran away. It is rumored that she tried to visit the Mother of Night, but unfortunately she was never received. It is said that she went to the abyss later, but she didn't dare to take a step in the end. The last time I heard about her was when Atlas, the youngest son of Epitus, was born. It is said that she accidentally ran into a young god who had just been born for a few decades, but for some reason, she was taught a lesson by the new god. After that, her figure disappeared, and the gods rarely heard rumors about her. Why, do you plan to look for her? As if she read her husband's mind, Rhea asked. No need. In fact, it's good for a god like her to live in seclusion alone. She has the noble status of an ancient Titan god, but she doesn't have the strength to match it, and she's arrogant. In this world with more and more new gods, this is not a good thing. Shaking his head, Kronos had nothing to say about this weak sister. Besides, he cared more about himself than others. As a god king, he already has the initial power. As long as he expands his divine power again, occupies half of the starry sky, 30% of the earth, or part of the ocean, he can truly gain a foothold in the field of divine power level 20. But as a god king, he is still far from having the power. Starry sky. Kronos said softly, whether it is the ocean or the mountains, they all have their corresponding main gods. They can have more powerful power in their own fields, but the starry sky is different. In this world, there is no god who is born to rule the starry sky. The sun is the most powerful celestial body in the starry sky, but it does not mean that he should be the master of the starry sky. If there is no suitable reason, the god king cannot directly attack the titans, which can easily arouse the sensitive nerves of his brothers. But now there is a very suitable candidate for the god mountain. Through him, Kronos may also have a group of fans. Chaos has never been interested in power. He is like his priesthood, and he is always not interested in excitement. But compared to him, Phoebe is not used to being quiet. Let's go and meet Creus. The star gods are obviously his and Hyperion's common descendants. How can they be ruled by the sun god alone? And his second son Persis, I think the goddess of the stars is very suitable to be his wife. Holding his queen, Kronos rushed to the residence of the god of weather. Although he knew that after the god of stars Astraeus and the goddess of dawn Eos gave birth to a group of descendants, Creus had already negotiated with Hyperion that the four wind gods belonged to the weather and the star gods belonged to the sun, but he didn't care. I believe that if there is a chance, his brother should not care either. Chapter 57 Ms. Yi's question. Since the birth of mankind, living creatures are everywhere, and chaos seems to have suddenly become active. The contradictions between the gods seem to have been eased, and they have turned their attention to many lives, among which the humans around the sacred mountain have attracted the most attention. Because of the knowledge learned from the dream, the already intelligent golden humans are like turning on the plug-in. They divide occupations, build cities, and quickly widen the gap with humans in other places. In just a few hundred years, they have transformed from barbarism to civilization. Even if they were not born with only positive emotions, the primitive city-state may have already taken shape. There are smart beings among the gods who guess the source of everything, but they don't care. No matter what purpose the Lord of the spirit world spreads knowledge, they also benefit from it. It is easy to go from frugality to luxury, but it is difficult to go from luxury to frugality. Exquisite ornaments, gorgeous clothes, when the gods get used to all kinds of human creations, they can no longer do without them. It was in such an environment that the eldest son of the ancient sea god and Doris, the daughter of the ocean god, married, and the disputes between the sea gods seemed to have a tendency to be temporarily suspended. But in Chaos's sky, another conflict is brewing. With the support of the god king, Creus, the god of weather, who has finally advanced to powerful divine power, ordered his son to win over a group of star gods. They no longer obeyed Hyperion's orders, but respected the master of Mount Odysseus. The sun god was furious because of this. He wanted to fight directly. After all, the star gods could leave, but as regional gods, the celestial bodies they represented were still hanging in the starry sky. But as Zeus and Phoebe were invited to the god mountain, everything returned to peace. The situation was deadlocked for a while, and only their respective children occasionally fought in the starry sky. Until this day, a familiar skirt suddenly appeared in front of the dark moon, which rarely visited. Your Highness Nyx, I haven't seen you for many years. How are you recently? The cold moonlight shone through the underworld, just as Ryan had been looking at the earth. As soon as he sensed Ms. Night, he appeared directly outside the dark moon. Thousands of years ago, when Ryan took the initiative to spread dreams, he knew that there would be such a day. After all, in the original trajectory, the god of sleep and the god of death were the true gods bred by Nyx alone. Let's not talk about the god of death, but sleep is the rest of the soul and the rest of the body. Just like life, Ryan's absorption of sleep is not complete. Since it is incomplete, clues will be discovered. Nyx can easily detect that the son of God bred by her body lacks half of the priesthood, and the corresponding power has already flowed into the spirit world. Of course, Ryan will definitely not admit that he has planned it in advance. Unlike the Earth Mother, Your Highness, you don't often go out. Hee, you pretend to be quite like it. How come the prophet also pretends to be innocent? With a sneer, Nyx's words are still so impolite as thousands of years ago. However, Ryan has a high tolerance for this ancient god who stays at home every day. On the one hand, He couldn't beat her, and on the other hand, although the Dark Lord was gentle and polite last time, he still felt that Mizzy was more real. The intuition of the spiritual master is still trustworthy. What are you talking about? Ryan said with a smile. It takes strength to spy on fate. As a primitive god, you are also the existence that controls destiny. Unless you allow it, no one can see the destiny related to you. Maybe there is a misunderstanding. Why not tell me? Her eyes swept across Ryan's cheek. Nyx's expression did not change, but she was actually a little shaken in her heart. After all, in the field of destiny, there is little that can escape her perception. She is not very sure whether Ryan can see the future related to her, but even if he can, Nyx will definitely feel it. Prophecy is the observation and anchoring of destiny, and Mizzy's body symbolizes destiny itself. However, this is the truth, but it does not affect her attitude. Regardless of whether this matter has anything to do with Ryan, she will assume that he is related to him. After all, in chaos, no one can take advantage of her for nothing. You devoured the concept of death, am I right? Looking at the cold face under Nyx's veil, Ryan nodded calmly and said, "That's right, but it's just an accident. When I created the spiritual life, I found that they were different from gods. Although they had consciousness, they were not immortal. So I accelerated time and created the first death of chaos. After that, the source of death was connected with the spiritual world. But I have to say that death is so weak that even a god of weaker power can't support it. This is a lie. The absorption of the source of death is obviously not an accident, but the second half of the sentence is true. Compared with life, death is just like non-existence. In other myths, the god of death is often the bottom line, or even the top ancient god, but this is not the case in chaos. Here, the god of death is just a third-rate passerby, playing the role of black and white impermanence. Not only can he not decide when mortals die, but even the soul has nothing to do with him. In this world, physical death belongs to the realm of destiny, which is a level below fate. The end of a life is because he is destined to die and the string of fate is broken, not because the life is exhausted and life and death are transformed into each other. The later Moirai is the symbol of this kind of destined death. One of them is the weaver of the lifeline, one is the one who determines the length, and one is the one who cuts the silk thread. And their collective name is not the three gods of death, but the three sisters of fate. On the contrary, in the soul, Ryan can be sure that there are indeed some laws of death. Okay, I'll just treat it as an accident. On the side, Nyx didn't care what Ryan said at all, she just continued to ask, what about dream and sleep? Why, are these two also accidents? Facing Ms. Yi's questioning, Ryan smiled slightly and did not rush to respond, but asked back. The spirit world cannot devour the source power that already has the corresponding gods, so this should not be your authority. Since it has nothing to do with you, but you come to me for this, it means that you should be inspired by the world and give birth to the heirs corresponding to these authorities. Faced with Ryan's accurate guess, if she was not in charge of destiny, Nyx would have suspected that the other party had secretly predicted her fate. But now, she could only glare at Ryan, but she didn't know what to say. However, through the Nyx black dress that was close to the artifact of creation, the power of her glare was transmitted less than 30% at most. It seems that my guess is right. So, could it be that His Highness Nyx is very interested in the matter of the body giving birth to offspring, so he came to trouble me? From the last conversation, I thought that you and His Highness Erebus were very disgusted with this, and didn't want the body to be inexplicably given to you minus. Enough. Nyx interrupted coldly. But perhaps because of her naturally erratic tone, Ryan couldn't hear any coldness. Whether I like it or not, you have done these things. Since you have taken the corresponding power, you have to solve the troubles that come with it for me. Trouble? Ryan was really surprised. He thought that Ms. Yi was here to blame him, but she was here to solve the problem. After a little thought, Ryan decided to listen. He also wanted to know what kind of problem it was that she couldn't solve. Chapter 58 The Stuck God of Sleep. Appreciate further details. Faced with the angry look of Nyx, who had lost his initial momentum, Ryan said with interest. The previous gods who had their priesthood intercepted by him in advance only had reduced power at most, but those gods were all born in the form of intercourse. He really didn't know what extra trouble it would bring to Nyx if a god like this who was impregnated by heaven lost his priesthood. Taking a deep breath, Nyx looked at Ryan through the veil of the black dress and slowly said, "You should know that as the original god who lives with the world, we have the difference between our true body and our personal incarnation." Nodding slightly, after so many years, Ryan knew a lot more about the original gods. Unlike at the beginning, we can only speculate from the myths of later generations. Know something. Your body is part of the world. If you think of the world as a person, then they are different sides of the world. But after personification, you are separated from the world. Of course, from now on, you no longer have a complete personality. As Ryan has known for a long time, for the original gods, the children born from the original body have no essential relationship with their personified divine bodies. Mother Earth gave birth to children with Uranus and Pontos one after another. This is actually the same logic. For her, these three gods are at best her nominal children and are bred by the Earth, but they do not mean that she was conceived by Gaia. Therefore, Nyx and Erebus are actually a pure brother-sister relationship, which is not the same thing as the so-called husband and wife in later generations. That's why our ontology is an aspect of the world, so when the laws of the world are shaken, it is very likely that a new god will be born. With that said, Nyx glared at Ryan again. "So you absorb chaos power, that's your business, but can you not only absorb half of it?" Ryan was a little confused before, but as soon as these words came out, he instantly understood the cause and effect. Unlike death, which is so weak that it is almost non-existent, sleep has a part in the material realm. In other words, most of the authority has both spirituality and materiality. The two are opposite but unified. They intermingle with each other to give birth to most concepts in the world. So just like the spiritual world can only hold half of the power of life, the same is true for sleep. Theoretically, the remaining share can still give birth to a weakened version of the god of sleep, but this time he is not as powerful as recorded in the myth, and he no longer has the power to put the god king to sleep. But perhaps due to the different gestation methods, although the god of death had no chance of being born, Hypnos, the god of sleep, also had a small accident. So what you are saying is that the embryo of the god of sleep was conceived according to the complete authority of sleep, and should also come with 3,000 attached dream gods. But now, because the source power was sucked away by me in advance, so is his birth stuck. Ryan tried his best to keep his expression the same. Although he knew that Nyx was not equated with her true form, he still couldn't help but laugh a little when he thought that she had a half-pregnant son of God who was stuck. "You'd better not laugh, or I'll make it impossible for you to laugh again." A faint voice came from behind the ever-changing black veil, and an inexplicable chill enveloped Ryan. But to this day, Ryan is no longer the same person he was before reincarnation, so his expression remained unchanged and was not affected at all. Instead, he thought for a while, and then said seriously, "Regarding this matter, His Highness Nyx, I deeply sympathize with you for your experience. But judging from the current situation, I have 3 ways to solve your trouble." Without asking at all, Nyx continued to look at Ryan with a death gaze as if he was considering how to strike. Seeing this, Ryan directly stated his method. The first type is the simplest, but also consumes the most. Tilting his head, Ryan glanced at the bottom of the underworld where Tartarus was. The Cyclops and the 100-armed giant were imprisoned there, and the laws left by Uranus were still restricting them. As long as the reigning god king did not forgive them, they would not be able to get out of the abyss. Just like the Earth Mother, you can consume the original source to make up for this missing part. But the price is that I don't guarantee what the offspring will be, but there is a high probability that it will be a monster with a priesthood, and the Cyclops is already the more beautiful among them. Continue. Ms. E was obviously not satisfied with this answer. Not to mention monsters, even true gods, she doesn't want them. Chaos brought her own dry food, and it was annoying enough to ask her to be a surrogate mother. It was a complete dream to expect her to consume her own strength. The second method is a bit painful. Ryan didn't expect Nyx to agree. In fact, The only option he really preferred was the last option. Do you remember your former heavenly father? Since Uranus can send the 12 titans back to the belly of the Earth Mother, then as long as we adopt a similar method, we can naturally take out the gestating embryos. The true God is immortal anyway, so let him be an embryo outside the body that will never mature. Lane's advice was cold, but neither he nor Nyx cared. For the latter, she doesn't even want to look at the burdens that the world forces on her body. As for Ryan, a being who has not even been born with wisdom, he also doesn't care whether the other party exists or not. What about the third method? Somewhat tempted, but recalling Gaia's painful wail, Nyx still wanted to hear the last option. Moreover, this behavior that obviously violated the laws of the world would not only bring pain, but would also inevitably lead to punishment in the world. The last option is to give it to me. Ryan said calmly, I will give it sleep and power again, but it will also be eroded by the spirit world, rebred, and born in an alternative way. The spirit world cannot erode pure matter, but gods, they are difficult to measure with spirituality or matter. I prefer that divinity itself has both. The eyes behind the veil narrowed slightly, and Nyx seemed to react. This is the solution you really want. No matter when you don't suffer, you can always find some way to gain benefits. You are worthy of you, His Highness Ryan. However, Ryan's solution made her quite satisfied, so she just sneered and was ready to accept it in her heart. Ryan was not angry at all. After all, as Nyx said, he had never suffered a loss because of this. So what's your decision? It's yours. Nyx answered without hesitation, the source power that chaos forced upon me. I never want to see it again. Chapter 59, Land of Eternal Night. Then let's go. Leon said under the shining of the dark moon. Since he had made a decision, he didn't plan to waste any more time. But before leaving, Ryan looked to the west. In that direction, there was a very obvious breath that tried to hide itself. Why isn't that your man? No, if nothing unexpected happens, it should be sent by Kronos. Feeling the invisible airflow that he thought was well hidden under the shining of the dark moon, Ryan felt a little funny. One of the four wind gods, which one is still to be determined, but judging from the breath, it is likely to be Zephyros, the god of the west wind who was rejected last time. The other party has been here for a long time, but Ryan had been staying in the spirit world before, so he ignored him. But whether it is the god of the west wind or not, Ryan actually doesn't quite understand why the other party dared to secretly monitor him and a primitive god. Even Ryan, unless he hides in history, will be faintly sensed by Gaia when he sets foot in the underworld or the earth. The concealment of the wind god is more of a physical change. It is okay to deceive other gods, but Ryan and the original gods can see his existence at a glance. Do you want me to deal with him? Nyx said casually on the side. She was not interested in why Kronos sent people to monitor the movements of the underworld moon, but the other party dared to stay after seeing her, which was a provocation to her authority. No need, I can probably guess what he is here for. Shaking his head, Ryan said lightly. Kronos wants to attack the starry sky, but I also have several star gods under my command. He probably has the idea of stopping me in advance if I have any signs of intervening in the dispute. After all, I am not a Titan god, and he does not need to take care of his brothers. But since he wants to know where I am, let's show him. Let's go. If this guy is still here when I come back, it won't be too late to deal with him. Ignoring the existence of Zephyros, Ryan didn't mind him reporting to the God King. But if he dares to come again later, that's another matter. Then let's go. Nodding indifferently, Nyx walked towards the edge of the underworld. If the existence of the god of the west wind hadn't jumped in front of her, Nyx would not even think of looking at it. It doesn't matter to her whether she solves it or ignores it. Crossing the gray plains and passing the banks of the Styx River under the guidance of Lady Night, Ryan came to the land of eternal night for the first time. At the beginning of creation, darkness enveloped everything and eternal night covered the sky, but when the true god of the sky was born, both sank under the earth, between the abyss and the stratum. Later, because of the interweaving of the power of the four primitive ancient gods, the underworld was born. At the edge of the underworld is the realm of eternal night and darkness, which is why the status of underworld moon is very high in the underworld, and Hecate, who was originally on the trajectory, even became the sub-king of the underworld. Because the difference between the size of the underworld is actually the range covered by the light of the underworld moon. Where there is light, it is the underworld. Where there is no light, it is darkness and eternal night. Unlike the ground, although the underworld will also expand with the increase of the world's source power, its expansion is not the growth of the land, but the boundary of the light of underworld moon. Therefore, the speed of expansion of the underworld in this world is actually faster than the Earth on the ground. Because the current Pluto is the manifestation of the spirit world, its light is emitted by the 7 spiritual moons in turn, which is much stronger than the original trajectory. It can be said that if Ryan does not consider the privatization of public property, in fact under the arrangement of the spirit world, the overall origin of chaos has risen, but at present, this rise is only reflected in the expansion of the world area. Is this the land of eternal night? Following Nyx, Ryan crossed the boundary between light and night. It was dark in front of his eyes for a moment, but the next moment, the surroundings became bright again. Unlike Ryan's imagination, although there is only night in the land of eternal night, it is not without light. Although the source cannot be found, Ryan can clearly distinguish that the light of the land of eternal night is the light of the celestial bodies in the night sky, even including the illusory stars hung by Ryan. Their starlight can also shine here. This is the realm of the ancient god of creation. The alternation of day and night in the present world is nothing more than the ebb and flow of the external power here. After all, night existed long before the birth of the sun. Therefore, it is not the rising and falling of the sun that determines day and night, but the existence of the night that divides black and white. The gods say that the land of eternal night is the skirt of the goddess of night, and the night lady weaves the skirt with secrets, and the stars are her embellishment. Now it seems that the rumors are somewhat true. Admiring this mysterious scenery that he had never seen before, Ryan couldn't help but exclaimed sincerely, "Then you will be disappointed. There will be nothing else here except the night." The tone is the same as always, but this time, Nyx's heart moved slightly. She plans to find out later who said the skirt of the goddess of night first. The gods may not know that in the field of fate, her body is the symbol of destiny, and the field that the mother of night is best at is doom. Walking forward and strolling in the land of eternal night, Ryan felt a sense of peace from the heart. In his eyes, this was a quiet and beautiful garden. The roadside was filled with exotic flowers and plants that were rarely seen in the outside world. Except for the dim sky, it was no different from the ground. Even in addition to plants, there are many lives hidden in the night. Ryan can feel that it is the soul that once came from his hand. In the land of eternal night, those strange lives seem to have become god-like existences. They exude different powers such as fear, silence, and doom, and even a little chaos is mixed in. The former is the manifestation of the authority of Lady Night, and the latter is the remnant of the beginning of creation. Without the guidance of Nyx, any person or god who enters the land of eternal night will never see a trace of light. They can only grope forward in the night, and then be turned into fertilizer by flowers and plants that look normal but actually don't know what is inside, or be devoured by the wandering lives here. Even if they are gods, they may not die, but eternal sleep is no different from death. Every bit of divine power they get from their priesthood will be absorbed, and then they will never wake up again. I don't know how long I have been walking, but Ryan can feel that the chaos all around is slowly decreasing until it disappears completely, and the power of the night is unprecedentedly strong. Even gradually, Ryan felt the breath closer to the world. That is fate and cause, inevitable destiny, and natural order. The three-phase incarnation of Lady Night, or rather, the three-phase incarnation of chaos in the world. Among the primitive gods, night was born last, but it also carries more preferences of the world. Until a certain moment, Nyx, who was leading the way, suddenly stopped. "We're here," she said. "We're here." Confused, Ryan asked, "What about the embryo of the god of sleep you mentioned?" "Hey, isn't it there?" Pouting, Nyx pointed to the front. Ryan looked over. There, in the middle of the purple grass, a huge white sleeping flower was swaying slowly. The embryo of the god of sleep is not a giant cocoon, nor does it have any traces of flesh and blood. A flower is all it has. Chapter 60 Assimilation. Is this the embryo of the god of sleep? It was somewhat surprising. Ryan did not expect it to be like this. Of course, so please remember not to pretend to know something when you don't know it, Your Highness Ryan. With a snort, Nyx explained, You don't think that the body conception of the original god is the same as that of normal gods. Conception is just easier to understand. In fact, it is the same as when we were born. The power related to chaos gathered and turned into something that actually existed, and then we were born. As he said, Nyx pointed to the white flower. It looks a bit like the white sleeping flower in the previous life, but from the size, it is as big as a few people hugging. When it blooms completely, the true god will be born from then on. And the nutrients he absorbs when he grows are the power of my body. Nodding, Ryan probably understood a little. No wonder the Titan gods do not feel a sense of power decline when they give birth to children, but Gaia has fallen from the most powerful ancient god to the last. This is not only because of the division of priesthood, but also because gods conceived without intercourse will directly absorb the power of the mother. So they are born strong, unlike the later ones who have a process of growth and development. The 12 Titans are just stuck in the process of transformation between the two, so they have both power when they are born, but they are not as strong as their uncles. I see. Ryan understood a little, so the world once invested its source power into the earth using the most suitable environment to nurture it. When the time is right, they will become gods, and this is the origin of Uranus and his two brothers. When the 5 primitive gods were conceived, there was no matter in the world, so Ryan saw everything. But he was a little unclear about how Gaia gave birth to the 3 gods. Of course, the respected prophet would not really think that the earth gave birth to the sky and the ocean. With a chuckle, Nyx seemed to be in a better mood. Shaking his head, Ryan felt that he had gotten used to Nyx's way of speaking. In comparison, he was more interested in this special way of conceiving gods. Previously, he had not continued to divide the gods because there were no creatures with strong enough essence to carry the divine duties. But now, he might be able to try this method of origin breeding. You can't do it, or it's difficult to do it. As if seeing Ryan's thoughts, Nyx reminded him, in fact, this behavior is not small. The damage to the breeding environment and the world itself is not small. If it is not more harmful than beneficial, why should Uranus be crowned the god king for creating a new way of God's birth? If he is given another 30,000 years, or 50,000 years, maybe he can really take that step and become the first great divine power to achieve acquired achievements, and use this to fight against the power of fate. Power is power, and status is status. Whether it is the personified Dark Knight twin gods or Uranus at his peak, their power is more than that of the great divine power that has just been promoted. But the gap in status means that they are destined to be unable to do many things, and fighting against fate is one of them. Although confrontation and victory cannot be confused, it is ultimately a breakthrough from 0 to 1. Just like there are many mortals who can defeat gods in the future, but gods are immortal. They can defeat gods thousands of times, but as long as they lose once, everything will be over. I understand, but I will still try it once. Nodding with a smile, Ryan continued, practice is the only criterion for testing truth. I don't trust Chaos's judgment very much. Pouting, Nyx did not continue to dissuade. She just mentioned that Ryan must hit the south wall before turning back, so let him try. Now, she wants to solve the problem of the divine embryo as soon as possible. You can try it if you want, but now you have arrived. Use your method to let this embryo continue to be nurtured. Although I have separated from my body, this feeling of constantly being drained of power is still very uncomfortable. Okay, remember to release the barrier of the land of eternal night to the outside world. If you want to assimilate it, the power of the spiritual world is indispensable. Nodding, Ryan stepped forward. The feeling of the divine body in front of him was very strange, or it could be said that divinity itself was so strange. It cannot be simply described as spirit or matter. To be precise, it has both, and it seems to have neither. If it must be described, Ryan feels that divine flesh and blood tends to be in a quantum state. If you observe it in the way you observe matter, it will show all the characteristics of matter. If you observe it in the way you observe spirit, it will show all the characteristics of spirit. And the subjective will of the gods is the only observer that can make this wave function collapse in the direction they want. At this moment, the sleeping flower in front of Ryan exists in a material state. The first step to assimilate it is to let it turn itself into a spiritual state. Reaching out his hand, Ryan tried to touch the petals of the embryo in front of him. But soon, he stopped this behavior because he faintly felt the traces of the world's will. It was born under the will of the world and is naturally protected by chaos. Only when it takes the initiative to release the restrictions can you touch it. On the side, watching Ryan's actions, Nyx reminded him. Take the initiative? That's easy. Nodding slightly, Ryan's will merged with the spiritual world that had already enveloped the underworld. Nyx released the restrictions of the land of eternal night at the right time, so the spiritual power followed the path Ryan came in and directly reached the vicinity of the embryo. So the next moment, the sleep and dream source power that had been eaten up appeared in Ryan's hand. As if sensing the same root and source, the big white flower immediately swayed, and the power surrounding it disappeared immediately. Seeing this, Ryan did not rush to send the source power that had already been transformed by the spiritual world, but operated his divine power to quietly pull the embryo of the god of sleep into the dream. In the dream, the embryo's hazy consciousness seemed to feel that the surrounding environment had changed and its current state was incompatible with it. So driven by instinct, the characteristics of its divine body began to change, from the material state to the spiritual state. In the outside world, Ryan looked at the sleeping flower that began to change synchronously. He no longer hesitated and injected the source power in his hand into it. Sensing the same source of breath connecting with itself, the sleeping flower still sucked greedily even though it was still in the dream, and became a part of its own divine duty. However, with the integration of the source power, the big flower that turned into a spiritual state did not notice that it was also being assimilated by the spiritual world. For Ryan, the source power he gave was like a divine nature bestowed upon him. It not only did not affect his control over the relevant fields, but was also equivalent to installing an external plugin. For the embryo in front of him, there was no such thing as assimilation. After all, it was nothing more than a transfer from the boss named Chaos to the boss named Spiritual World. It did not have any independent consciousness and could not feel the difference at all. Only the worldly power that originally lingered around the embryo was violently turbulent again, but neither the object it protected nor Ryan paid attention to its meaning. Chapter 61 One Day God King. This is the consequence of being without wisdom. Feeling the world will gradually becoming active, but unable to be stopped because of the embryo's active cooperation, Nyx could not help but sneer. She has never had a good impression of chaos will, which often causes trouble for the original god. Maybe, but if it really has consciousness, I'm afraid you will miss the present again. An eternal supreme, omniscient and omnipotent ruler is much more terrifying than any god king. While assimilating the embryo in front of him, Ryan still had time to chat with Ms. Yi. If nothing unexpected happens, he will stay here for at least hundreds of years. Assimilating a true god for the first time is not an easy task. He also tried to take it back to the spirit world for incubation, but the roots of the flower in front of him had already deeply rooted in the land of eternal night. Forcibly taking it away would only cause greater damage to Ms. Yi's body. Now it's good. The power of the spirit world flows into the eternal night through the gap opened by Nyx. The war in the outside world is about to begin, and it will happen in the sky. This is a dispute about the master of the starry sky. Directly changing the topic, it is obvious that Nyx does not want any eternal god king. Her eyes penetrated the night, and then, as expected, she saw the preparations for war in the starry sky. About hundreds of years ago, the second and third sons of Creus were born one after another. The second son Pallas is the god of war, and as for his third son, it is Perses, the god of destruction, who is in charge of material destruction. Not long ago, at the instruction of the god king and the god of light, Phoebe, he and Caius and Phoebe's second daughter, the goddess of the star Asteria. It is precisely because of this that the situation in the starry sky has become more and more tense. I guess Chaos stood on the side of Kronos, and he and Phoebe blocked Thea. Leon guessed casually with a calm tone. And the silence of Ms. Yi on the side undoubtedly proved that his guess was correct. Although the war has not yet begun, the movements of several Titan gods cannot be hidden from Nyx. Unlike the earth and the ocean, Chaos does not use the starry sky as the main god of the priesthood, but Nyx, who controls the night, can barely be counted as half of it. This is normal. Chaos is indeed not interested in power. He is the god of the lightless celestial body. Perhaps he is tainted with the source of darkness, just like you and Erebus who don't like to move around. But Phoebe is different. She actually does not have a complete domain that belongs to her. Her light comes from the power she received from her sister when she was born, and her body comes from the sun under the influence of the priesthood instinct. She is eager to be as radiant as her sister, but she is inevitably a little jealous. So do you think that the war in the starry sky will be decided soon? Nyx did not pay attention to these in the past, or rather, as a primitive god, and under Chaos system, she really had nothing to pay attention to. After all, the gods of the outside world combined are not her opponents, and there is no way for the gods of this world to practice and ascend. Apart from merging with her body and blurring her perception of time, she didn't know what else she could do. No, this war won't end soon. Ryan said lightly, shaking his head gently. The starry sky is different from the earth. It not only has an area, but also has differences in height. This means that its victory or defeat will not be decided in the short term. Besides, for well-known reasons, Kronos himself will not take action. At most, he will send his queen of gods, and in the starry sky, Rhea and Creus may not have the advantages they imagine. Just wait and see. Ryan concluded, if there is no accident, there will be no winner in this battle of the sky before the real turning point. It will last at least 1,000 years, and because the energy of the God King is involved, the Ocean Lord, who has just shown signs of reconciliation, will once again stir up conflicts with his uncle. What about you? Looking at the black-clothed gods who were talking freely, Nyx couldn't help asking, where do you stand in this dispute? Facing Ms. Yi's slightly strange eyes, Ryan looked up at the sky. 3,000 years, maybe 2,000 years. When the time is right, I will personally hand the knife to Kronos. My intuition of fate tells me that when the God King occupies the starry sky, the urging from the laws of the world will no longer be able to stop it. The 6 sons of God will be born one after another, and the war will be reignited between the 2 mountains. As for me, with a slight smile, Ryan looked towards the direction of the abyss again. Tartarus, the only original god with a complete personality. He silently swallowed all the chaos in the world, and even the myths of later generations had few records of him. But this is a real world, or a world where the trajectory of fate is increasingly deviated. After Zeus ascended the throne, there were not many so-called myths that could be believed. As for me, how about being a one-day god king? I caught a glimpse of Nyx's expression, but Ryan did not mean to explain. For some things, he only has a guess now. After all, it involves 2 god kings and Chaos' unique mythological system. He doesn't know whether his idea can succeed. But it doesn't matter if you give it a try. Where it starts, there it ends, he told Kronos, but the reverse is also true. Compared to the starry sky, I am more worried about your sister. Sighing, thinking about the life Aquarius, Ryan still doesn't believe that Mother Earth will really silently endure that loss. Not all gods put the pros and cons first, or rather, among the Chaos gods who have no way forward, the majority follow their own will. Gaia is the one who not only has ideas, but also has the ability. On Mount Odals, the palace of the God King. When Ryan was transforming the embryo of the gods in the land of eternal night, the god of the west wind had returned to the mountain. Kronos sat at the table and chairs, with the wind god Zephyros in front of him. Not long ago, this existence who was arranged by him to go to the underworld conveyed key information to him. Ryan left the spirit world, but did not go to the surface. At the same time, the true gods of the spirit world who often appeared in the starry sky also returned to the underworld. You mean, the Mother of Night and the Lord of the spirit world met, and then rushed to the land of eternal night together? After a little thought, Kronos confirmed with the god of wind again. Although he didn't say it directly before, the God King actually just wanted him to monitor the movements of the gods of the underworld at the gate of the underworld. Even Ryan was secondary. The god of skylight and the goddess of daylight, who also had corresponding priesthoods, were the ones he was really on guard against. After all, in the early years, these two gods had the idea of moving to the starry sky. Kronos could not guarantee whether they would stand with Hyperion, so he sent the god of west wind to guard the underworld in advance. But who would have thought that Zephyros would actually exceed the task? Kronos was really a little surprised. This god of west wind, who barely entered the weak divine power, was so brave that he dared to follow the Lord of the spirit world and Lady Night under the shining of the dark moon. Even he himself might not dare to do such a thing. You did a good job. So Kronos said in a gentle tone, but I still need to confirm it again. Zephyros, are you sure they didn't discover your existence? Chapter 62 Urge. I'm not sure, Your Majesty. After hesitating for a while, Zephyros still didn't dare to speak out. Facing the great Lord of Eternal Night, I can't guarantee that she didn't find me, but the Mother of Night probably didn't pay attention to my existence. In fact, the god of West Wind felt that he was probably discovered by Lady Night early on, but the other party didn't pay attention to him. After all, in the eyes of the Chaos gods, the two gods of the Dark Night are all gods who are as they are. Except for a few existences, they don't even bother to pay attention to their own children, so Zephyros thinks that it is completely normal for him to be ignored by this Nyx. As for Ryan, the god of West Wind didn't think he could find him. Perhaps in other myths, simple changes in form can be easily seen through, but the gods of chaos do not have this ability. Turning into animals or dead things to avoid the pursuit of other gods is a daily drama of the later Olympian gods, and it has been tried and tested. As for the Lord of the spirit world, I have been wandering in the underworld for hundreds of years. Since he did not expel me at the beginning, I think he did not find my trace. The god of wind is still very confident in his authority. In terms of combat power, he is not ranked among the gods, but in terms of hiding his body, the main gods of several major pantheons may not be able to discover his existence. Is that so? After a little hesitation, the God King did not know whether to believe it or not. While thinking, his fingers tapped the table lightly, making a rhythmic sound. Zephyros, you continue to watch at the edge of the land of eternal night. If someone comes out or other gods make any unusual movements, remember to tell me immediately. The god of the west wind was shocked when he heard this. It's okay to let him go to the underworld. He thinks he is still hiding well. But running to the edge of the land of eternal night, who knows if it will be regarded as a provocation by Ms. Yi. Your Majesty. I know the risk is great, but I just want you to go and see. If you see His Majesty Nyx, you can retreat immediately. As long as you do this well, I will recognize you as the leader of the four wind gods in the name of the God King. Looking at Zephyros's face that changed immediately, the God King promised. In chaos, there is no balance between earth, water, wind and fire. The power of wind is the weakest one, not to mention that the four wind gods only represent the wind on the ground. In this era where only medium-level gods are barely regarded as strong and strong gods can control the situation, Kronos believes that even if this trip is dangerous, Zephyros will not refuse him. Yes, Your Majesty. After struggling for a while, Zephyros finally couldn't resist the temptation. The four wind gods themselves do not represent all of the wind. In his own judgment, the middle of the weak gods is the limit of the west wind priesthood. But if he could become the leader of the four wind gods recognized by the God King, and even continue to expand the scope of authority of West Wind through the God King's order in the future, then he might not be hopeless in the realm of medium power. And in Zephyros's opinion, since the Mother of Night ignored him at the beginning, he thought nothing would happen in the future. Other gods would not be able to find his trace. After receiving the order, the god of West Wind immediately turned into wind and left. Looking at Zephyros's departing back, the God King didn't know what he was thinking. It seems that you have made up your mind. A voice suddenly sounded in the quiet palace. Rhea walked out of the passing time. She looked at the God King with a thoughtful face and asked softly. Yes, It's time to start minus. Sighing, Kronos looked at a corner of the sacred mountain. The union of Perses and Asteria was promoted by him, otherwise it would take at least hundreds of years for the two to get together. But perhaps it was because of his eagerness that Perses was very dissatisfied with this matter. As the third son of Creus, the god in charge of material destruction, his priesthood limit is enough to support his advancement to powerful divine power. Although due to the type of priesthood, his divine power is accumulated very slowly, but this does not affect his contempt for the goddess of the star. A god who can hardly reach even weak divine power if it is not due to the pressure from the god king and his father. What qualifications does he have to be with him? Are you sure? No longer thinking about the troubles, I think the god of weather will comfort his child. Compared with Perses, Kronos cares more about Rhea's situation. With Creus and me, and your sickle, Hyperion is not our opponent, but the premise is that the couple of the gods of the celestial bodies will always stand on our side. Although the combat power of the Sun priesthood is far superior to weather and time passage, and the starry sky is also half of the opponent's home court, but with the high-level artifact in hand, Rhea has enough confidence to defeat the Sun god. But this is limited to Hyperion alone. If Light and Sun join forces, then she can only rely on her priesthood to delay time. Creus may not care about the ownership of the starry sky, but Phoebe has always envied Thea. After all, with the mother of light and the sun god, who would care about a goddess of light? Shaking his head, Kronos was not worried about the situation of the celestial god and his wife. He turned his head and asked about the situation on the other side. What's the latest situation on the sea? As stable as ever, said the Queen of Heaven, since the union of Nereus, the gentle sea, and Doris, the ocean god system has not had a conflict with the ancient sea god for a long time. Just pretending. Wait for me to take action first, and they will soon be in turmoil. With a sneer, Kronos knew that this was the impact of his two increases in the power of the god king in just a few hundred years. When the starry sky becomes lively, they will temporarily let down their guard against me. As long as I don't do it myself, they won't unite. Let's go and see Creus. The starry sky is too vast. Even if you have the advantage, it will be difficult to completely determine the winner for at least a few hundred years. After that, Kronos stood up. Rhea was silent for a moment, and then followed her husband's footsteps. But before she was about to go out, she still spoke with a little hesitation. Kronos. I have already felt the instinctive urging of the Queen of Heaven's power. Stopping his steps, the God King's expression did not change, but a gloomy flashed in his eyes. The laws of the world are not yet complete. Chaos instinctively hopes that more gods will be born as soon as possible, and the God King is undoubtedly the role model of the gods. But giving birth to heirs at this moment is undoubtedly a step towards destruction for Kronos. I know, Rhea, I feel it too. But wait a little longer. Take a deep breath, the God King comforted his sister. After conquering the starry sky, let the sea at least nominally submit to me. Only then will I have enough confidence to face my fate. That being said, Kronos actually knew that even if he completely conquered the sea, his power would not be as strong as that of his former father. Perhaps the power of the God King was barely enough, but Uranus's power was not only because of the kingship. Chapter 63, 700 Years of God War. On Mount Odile, another 8 years passed. When everything was ready, the first real war of gods broke out in chaos with the order of the God King. The war was fought in the name of the god of weather and the god of sun for the ownership of the star god. The God King just stood on the top of the God Mountain and released his power from afar. So except for the family of the god of sun, no other gods went to help Hyperion. Even the two sea gods were just silent spectators. In stark contrast to the short war of gods that only lasted for 7 days, it was easy for gods with medium or higher powers to distinguish the superiority. But it was difficult to distinguish the victory or defeat. Unless there was a crushing gap, they would not end the battle in a short time. So when the Mother of Light was held back by the god of celestial bodies and his wife, the battle faced by the Queen of Gods and the god of weather became protracted. Being in the starry sky, with similar levels of divine power, the power of the god of sun was extraordinary. Even if Kronos gave the sickle that had hurt the Father of Heaven to Rhea, they still had to fight for several years before they could temporarily force Hyperion back. After all, this postnatal high-level artifact has the greatest damage to Sky, the second most to the God King, and has no effect on Earth. Facing the Sun God, it can indeed make up for Rhea's weakness in fighting, but that's all. The battle between the main gods lasted for a long time, and the gap in the number of true gods became obvious. Compared with the few true gods in the Sun God family, the 3 ash tree goddesses beside Rhea, the other 3 of the 4 wind gods, the gradually growing sky breaker Atlas, and even the second and third sons of Creus who were born not long ago all shined in this battle of gods. In the first 1 or 200 years of the battle, because of Hyperion's strength, the overall situation was still in a stalemate. But as the power of the new generation of gods gradually increased, the balance of victory and defeat began to tilt towards the God King. Although it is difficult to completely occupy most of the starry sky without thousands of years due to the vastness of the starry sky and the frequency of battles every few years, the result of the war is already foreseeable. Star fields changed hands one after another, and the star gods whose bodies were in these star fields also changed sides. If there were no changes, it seemed that Hyperion was doomed. At the same time, on the sea, the relationship between the 2 sea gods also took a sharp turn for the worse. 200 years after the war in the starry sky, the short honeymoon period ended. Although several daughters of Nereus, the gentle sea, were born one after another, the war of gods still broke out in the sea. Unlike the starry sky, the ocean god and his wife had an absolute upper hand from the beginning. Even with the help of the god of mountains, Pontos still lost 3 battles. A large number of unknown sea areas were taken under the control of the ocean god. As long as he could digest them in thousands of years and incorporate them into his duties, these sea areas that appeared with the expansion of the world would help him move towards the peak of powerful divine power. However, as the sea god and the earth god who are best at recovery and long-term battles, a war on the sea takes longer than the starry sky and often lasts for decades. In addition, although the Earth Mother did not intervene, she still lent out the life bottle, so the war is still unlikely to end in a short period of time. For hundreds of years, the collision of divine power has occurred one after another on the earth, in the sky, and in the ocean. Many creatures on Chaos were accidentally injured and killed. The scattered humans did not understand why, and they thought that it was the gods who were angry, so they worshipped more devoutly, but few gods cared about them at this time. When the creatures died, their souls also followed the traction of the dark, drifted into the underworld, or came to the ocean, and returned to the embrace of the spirit world. In such an environment, after 700 years, the first god transformed by the spirit world finally appeared. In the depths of the land of eternal night, in a 2-story wooden house, Ryan brewed a pot of black tea for himself and quietly watched the final changes of the embryo of the god of sleep. Of course, it is not appropriate to call it an embryo now. The originally white sleeping flower was magnified thousands of times, and the petals that covered the sky and the sun also had some mysterious dark golden lines. Faintly, a faint fragrance came from the pistil, which made people feel drowsy when they smelled it. Around the big flower, a series of shadows that were not real or real were looming. They seemed to be the companions of the flower, and there was a strange connection between the two. How long will it take? Just in these 2 days. Taking a sip of tea, Ryan did not expect that this transformation took so long. And in his original estimate, the embryo of the sleeping god was likely to become an evil thing similar to Sun Devourer Uncertain Mist, but obviously, the result was not the case. After being accepted by the spirit world, although this god embryo also absorbed a little chaotic source power, perhaps because it was bred by the world in the way of orthodox gods at the beginning, it quickly rejected the power of chaos. At this moment, most of the embryo is still orderly. This means that it will come to the world as a god. After being transformed by your spirit world, its breath seems to have become a little strange. Nyx frowned slightly, and was a little unsure of the situation. The feeling of the divine embryo in front of her was different from that of the chaos gods. It seemed to have a little breath similar to Tartarus. Although it was not obvious, she would never make a mistake. It is indeed a little strange. Ryan nodded. He felt this special breath more clearly. If you must say it, it has a bit of born evil meaning. I thought it would become a new ancient evil creature, And I even named it Eternal Night Dream, but now it seems that it is more appropriate to call it an evil god. It has relatively complete wisdom, unlike the evil creatures with confused thinking, but because it has been exposed to some chaotic power, its emotions are also weaker than ordinary creatures. Secular morality, rules, and order are just tools for it. Perhaps only power can make it a little more peaceful. Concentrating slightly, sensing the godhead that has condensed in the embryo in front of him, Ryan said slowly. Condensing the godhead instead of directly merging with the source power means that it is already a true god. Although direct contact with the source power will bring stronger power, for gods, whether they hold power in a rational state is the only criterion for judging true gods. There are indeed many secrets of the gods. Even as the Lord of the spirit world, I only know the problems involving the source power and the body of the god, but I don't know why. Shaking his head, Ryan knew that this was because his own power level was not enough. If he were a great god, he would definitely be able to analyze many mysteries of the essence of gods by controlling the spirit world. But now, he can only verify his conjectures little by little in practice. Even with the help of the body, I don't know much about the essence of gods, so don't think too much. Nix did not expect Ryan's idea. Apart from anything else, the reason why gods are immortal is that no existence can interpret it. It started. After another half a day in the casual chat, the last step of the birth of the evil god finally arrived. The huge petals began to close, and the mysterious power was gestating. But perhaps because of the influence of the spirit world, the vision of the birth of the gods did not appear in the entire chaos, and only the land of eternal night responded to it. The power of the night floated over and then turned into petals falling all over the sky. Under the shining of the stars, there is a different kind of beauty. Ryan could feel that the originally hazy consciousness in the embryo began to become clear. As a god bred by the land of eternal night and the spirit world, it will be born with knowledge like the 12 titans, rather than growing up slowly from a baby. Time slowly passed until a certain moment, accompanied by an invisible force that made all beings fall asleep and dream, the petals opened again, and a young god with wings on his back squatted in the middle with his hands on his knees. His eyes and hair color are black, but the wings behind him are light gray. On his body, a cloth transformed from divine power wrapped around his body, which is a unique way of dressing in the world of chaos. Hypnos, the god of sleep, is just different from the gentle gods in the original mythology. As the lord of the spirit world, Ryan can clearly feel the true emotions of the god in front of him. The kind of indifference hidden under the appearance, except me, everything is empty. Chapter 64, Nyx, Trail. The newborn god opened his eyes, and the first thing he saw was the boundless night, and two ancient gods who had a stronger sense of presence than the night. One was the master of this place, and the entire interface was resonating with her. The other was also in harmony with the power of the spiritual world, and 7 layers of phantoms were displayed in the vision of divinity. In the perception of the god of sleep, 2 vast auras connected the sky and the earth, and he could be crushed into dust by just raising his hand. Subconsciously a little nervous, Hypnos couldn't help but clench a deep purple flute in his hand. It was his companion artifact, part of Sleep Dream, and a little chaos and music in the spiritual world. The lullaby played with it can make all gods fall into dreams, and can also make all living beings lose their minds in their dreams and please the gods in fighting. Hypnos, meet the Father God and the Mother God. The alert was only for a moment, and even Ryan couldn't find it if he didn't observe carefully enough. The next moment, the newborn god showed a humble and admiring look. As a person who is born with knowledge, Hypnos knew that the 2 gods in front of him were his parents. Since they created him, they naturally did not want to hurt him. Moreover, in front of these 2 terrible beings, the god of sleep did not think that his vigilance had any meaning. Instead of showing fangs, it is better to be gentle and harmless. Father God? Haha, according to the tradition of chaos, it seems to be the case. Seeing the change in Hypnos's expression, Ryan was stunned at first and then smiled. For gods, power is far more profound than blood connection. The power of Ryan and Nyx jointly created the gods in front of them, so from a legal point of view, they will indeed be regarded as parents by each other. Just refer to Uranus and Gaia to know how unreliable this kind of parent-child relationship without blood is. Moreover, this is the world of chaos. In the myths of later generations, fathers and sons killing each other is commonplace for gods and mortals. On the side, Nyx's expression was not very real under the black veil. She ignored Hypnos's greetings, just turned her head to look at Ryan, and said lightly, "Since the problem has been solved, you can take him away. As for the reward for this matter minus." Nyx finally believed Ryan's previous explanation. She also felt that no one could spy on her fate without her knowledge. Since Ryan did not do it intentionally, she should naturally give some return gifts. But in the empty land of eternal night, there is nothing to be used as a return gift. So Nyx stretched out her hand and tore off a corner of the hem. With a light shake, the torn fabric turned into black silk cloth. The fabric is just an appearance. In fact, she tore off a small part of Nyx's black dress for Mizzy. This artifact can't go any further anyway, so the loss of this little power is nothing. It's yours. With a light snort, Nyx threw the black cloth to Ryan, turned around, and silently merged into the night of the land of eternal night. Looking at this scene, Ryan couldn't help but laugh. Hee hee. Hypnos, it seems that your mother goddess doesn't like you very much. Taking the black cloth filled with the power of secret, Ryan turned his head and looked at the newborn god. But as soon as he said this, he clearly felt that the surrounding night had a slight sense of rejection towards him. Facing Nyx's subtle warning, Ryan said no more. "So, Father God, will I live with you in the future?" Looking a little sad about the departure of the mother goddess, Hypnos looked at Ryan with expectant eyes. Looking at this scene, Ryan had no intention of being soft-hearted. He knew very well that the evil god who was mixed with some chaotic source power during the gestation process was not a good man or a believer. For Hypnos, if he hadn't felt the difference in power between the two sides, and Ryan's control over his divine duties as the lord of the spirit world, he probably wouldn't care about this so-called father god at all. But Ryan didn't care. "Come with me, and you too." Signaling Hypnos and the 3,000 demigod dream evil spirits around him to follow, Ryan turned and walked towards the way in. The god of sleep hurriedly followed. Although he was just born, he also vaguely realized that in this area full of night, if he walked around without guidance, he would probably end up in a bad way. Following the path he came from, Ryan walked all the way. Perhaps it was because when the god of sleep was conceived before, Ms. Night allowed the power of the spirit world to explore the land of eternal night. Now, this road seems to really have some mysterious power. The night slightly avoided it, and the local creatures did not dare to act rashly here. Even without Ms. Night's guidance, Ryan still walked out smoothly. Until he crossed the boundary between the night and the underworld, he looked back at the place he had walked. Under the divine vision, a faint halo shrouded the road, but it changed with Ryan's departure. This is a manifestation of a little chaos in the land of eternal night, and the spaces inside it may change. But no matter how it changes, this road infected by the power of the spiritual world will always be preserved, but the location may change. In the future, if someone is lucky enough to get guidance, he can follow the road that Ryan once walked and enter and exit the land of eternal night safely under the protection of the power of the spiritual world. Of course, the premise of all this is that Mizzy is not interested in him. The remaining aura in the spiritual world can drive away the creatures under the night, but it is impossible to resist the ancient creation god himself. Hypnos. Turning around, Ryan asked casually, "Did you see that guy over there?" "Yes, Father God." Bowing slightly, the young spirit looked into the distance. Above the river Styx, there was clearly nothing, but in Hypnos' perception, a violent wave of emotions was hovering there, unabashedly showing its existence to the outside world. The current gods, or the gods of chaos, have always been like this. They often sense and hide through divine power and form, but are defenseless against spiritual aspects. Someone as powerful as Zeus would be sent into a dream by the original mythical god of sleep without noticing. In the face of the spiritual gods who are directly observed from the spiritual level, the god of west wind is hidden as if he does not exist. "Father God, do you need me to deal with him?" With a gentle smile on his face, Hypnos asked softly. "Go ahead and capture him." Nodding, Ryan agreed to Hypnos' request. Similar to the 12 Titans, Although Hypnos did not reach the limit allowed by the priesthood when he was born, he still has the power of a weak god in the middle. In a head-on battle, he may not be a match for Fengtian. But seeing that Xiphlos was still unaware, Ryan knew that the battle would be over soon. Chapter 65 Punishment. Before Ryan stepped out of the land of eternal night, the spirit of the West Wind God was unprecedentedly focused. The land of eternal night, which had been peaceful for hundreds of years, was once again volatile, a sign that someone had walked out of it. But no one knew who would come out of it. Maybe it was a black dress, or maybe it was just a nymph fairy. Under Zephyros's nervous gaze, a wave flashed, and Ryan and Hypnos walked out one after another. The fluctuations of the night gradually subsided, and after waiting for a while, the West Wind God finally breathed a sigh of relief after confirming that there was no third person. Just now, he had been thinking in his mind, if he was caught by Mizzy, how long would he have to hold on before confessing the existence of the God King? In fact, this idea had appeared many times in the past hundreds of years. But fortunately, reality did not give him the opportunity to make a choice. The Lord of the Spirit world is back, so I can report to the God King first. But why have I never seen the God next to him? Somewhat puzzled, but soon Zephyros thought of the unknown goddess of the moon and the star spreader who had appeared in the starry sky. No matter where the other party came from, he just had to wait for Ryan to return to the spirit world and then report to the God King. The position of the head of the four wind gods was in sight, and Zephyros was already impatient. What sound? Suddenly, the god of the west wind felt that his mind was a little fuzzy. Faintly, he seemed to see a gray feather falling from the void. He should be alert, but he didn't know when his thoughts had become slow. The pleasant melody sounded in his ears, and Zephyros's eyes gradually closed. The invisible wind returned to its original form, and the god of the west wind fell to the ground. In a face-to-face encounter, this weak true god silently lost his resistance. Beside Ryan, Hypnos put away the flute. Just now, the melodious lullaby was slowly played by him, and the power of sleep spread in all directions along the sound. The later sun god Apollo also had a lyre, which he could use to play a tune that was enough to confuse the gods. But in the hands of the real god of sleep, his flute is undoubtedly more powerful than the lyre given to Apollo by Hermes. Accompanied by the melodious tune, Hypnos lightly fluttered his wings. On the light gray wings, illusory feathers fell quietly and sank into the void. The music is sleep and the feathers are dream. Without any signs, Zephyrus in the sky just felt a wave of sleepiness and then lost consciousness in relaxation. If the spirit is tense and alert at all times, the power of the god of sleep will be greatly reduced. But obviously, the god of the west wind did not expect that he would be discovered, let alone understand the power of sleep. So without any resistance, he was taken down by Hypnos directly. "Father, how do you plan to punish him?" Flying into the sky and capturing Zephyrus, who had returned to his original appearance in the dream, Hypnos asked respectfully. Like him, the god of wind also has a pair of wings behind him, but they are slightly short. In chaos, although such winged gods are rare, there are still many of them, and they are also regarded as part of the mainstream gods. God of the west wind. Looking at the unconscious Zephyros in front of him, Ryan hesitated. He originally planned to take him into the spirit world and seal the immortal god, but in a moment, he gave up the idea. Seal a true god, which requires a constant consumption of power to offset the power he obtained from his priesthood. Although this is nothing to the spirit world, it is also meaningless. As long as the god cannot be killed, Ryan feels that any purely physical punishment is meaningless. Some gods let the god of sin hold up the sky forever, and some gods let him push the boulder, repeating the cycle, never ending. After making a decision, Ryan reached out and gently touched Zephyros's forehead. "Since you like to peep so much, then as a punishment, I will make you the worst peeper." The power flashed, and the wisdom of the god of west wind was missing a corner. Although he could still think, any idea from him would have omissions. At the same time, the uncertain fate silently enveloped Zephyros. In the dark, a change quietly occurred. From this moment on, when the god of west wind hides his body, he will definitely have flaws due to inconsideration. And even if the flaws are not discovered, all his actions will lead to an unknown ending under fate. If the original result is bad, there will be no change. If the original result is good, then start over. On the side, Hypnos, who was watching, folded his wings and watched the scene quietly. His expression was still respectful, but his heart was chill. For the evil god who was born with indifferent emotions, he didn't care about physical punishment. In contrast, this method of affecting wisdom and fate made him feel more afraid. Let's go. Leon threw Zephyros to the ground and ignored him. He drew a line in the space in front of him and a silver-white light gate emerged. He stepped in and Hypnos hurriedly followed. The gods always thought that the moon was the entrance to the spirit world, so the king of gods sent the wind god to monitor the underworld, but in fact, the moon is at most a front door. In the entire chaos world, any place covered by the spirit world can directly enter and exit the interface. But because Ryan has never opened the access to the spirit world to the living world, no god has ever discovered this in the past. In a few steps, Ryan passed through 3 layers of space-time barriers one after another. The Sinai Mountain was not far away, but in the third spiritual world, Ryan stopped. Until hundreds of years ago, there were no concrete things in the third spiritual world. Time and space were mixed, life had no basis for existence, and only the angels of the spiritual world occasionally passed by. But at this moment, it was not the case where Ryan was. On the surface, they were standing in the sky next to a small hill. Seeing Ryan stop, Hypnos also stopped. He looked at the surrounding environment. The space here was very small, with a total range of less than 100 miles. A few humans lived in the distance, and on the hill, a divine figure with a glowing body was talking to a mortal on the ground. This is the third spiritual world, and it is also your new home in the future. Slowly speaking of his arrangements, Ryan did not intend to bring Hypnos to his own temple. In fact, if Nyx had not come to him, Ryan would have cultivated a true god who controls dreams. But since he had it ready, he gave up his original plan. Now that Hypnos was born, it was time to start working. Although he was only a day-old being, he was a god after all, so he probably wouldn't care. Chapter 66 Dream Spirit World. Please tell me, I will try my best to fulfill your request. After just a brief encounter with him, the newly born Hypnos had already realized that pretending to be a well-behaved and obedient persona seemed useless, so he decisively changed his attitude. Do you see where this is? Looking around, Hypnos carefully observed the surrounding environment. The first was the radiant figure. He easily identified the other party's identity, a regional god born from the mountain. But what surprised him was that he couldn't see the other person's face clearly. This is also a dream, Hypnos said with certainty after concentrating for a while, a real dream separated from its master. This is a dream, but it's more than that. Normal dreams are based on the spirit of living beings. When the owner wakes up, the dream will be broken. But Hypnos could tell that the dream in front of him had lost contact with its owner. When the power of the spiritual world combines with it, it gradually becomes real. Even if its owner wakes up, it can still continue. Yes, this is half a real dream. Nodding, Ryan smiled and said, "This is a human dream. He is receiving a reward from the gods. This is his greatest wish. Because the world he has lived in is only so big, the size of this dream fragment is also fixed. In his eyes, the gods are supreme. So the god in the dream has no real face. There are many more dreams like this here. What I want you to do is to smelt, reshape and then splice these dreams together." With a wave of his hand, the scene in front of him instantly shrank. In an instant, the dream fragments within 100 miles radius turned into a transparent bubble. Around the two people, thousands of bubbles swirled around. These are the dreams of intelligent life on Earth for hundreds of years. Some of the protagonists are humans and more are beasts. Hypnos even saw a few regional gods. They are stacked on top of each other and interact with the power of the spiritual world. The stronger the owner of the dream, the greater the power of the corresponding fragments. Vaguely, in the dreams of some gods, Hypnos even felt signs of life. It was a new life similar to his 3,000 dream evil spirits, but absolutely different. Real dreams are the best material to inherit order and chaos. Turning to look at the god of sleep, Ryan opened up some of the third-level spiritual world permissions to him. The time and space in the spiritual world becomes more and more chaotic as you go deeper. But at the same time, the further you go in, the more spacious the rules become. For powerful spirits, the shallow spiritual world will give them a feeling of oppression and is not conducive to their continued growth. Over the years, most of the lives that were born in the spiritual world and the souls of those who died due to the war with the gods outside have accumulated in the first and second levels of the spiritual world, and some have even given birth to primitive social structures. Many of them have become powerful and gradually mastered extraordinary powers. So Ryan has been thinking about what kind of things can exist stably in chaotic time and space and give shallow spirits a chance to adapt to the process of change from order to chaos. Undoubtedly, the dream was the answer to his final choice. You mean, you want me to turn dreams into the cornerstone of this interface? Even after its main body is formed, it has the ability to absorb dreams and turn it into a part of itself? Feeling the interface authority open to him, Hypnos asked. Yes. Ryan nodded. Dreams are based on reality, but are transcendent from reality. They naturally symbolize the process of order transforming into chaos. Dreams that are closer to the real world should be placed closer to the second level of the spiritual world. Dreams that are too bizarre should be constructed close to the fourth level of the spiritual world. Even the dreams of some powerful creatures have power in themselves. When they are constructed as part of the spiritual world under the influence of the spiritual breath, some special spiritual lives can be born. As he said that, Ryan's thoughts were a little wandering. For a moment, he thought of some dark fairy tales he had seen in his previous life. It is impossible for serious fairy tales to exist. After all, in dreams, people's behavioral logic is closer to arbitrary. Coupled with the chaotic time and space in the spiritual world, Ryan doesn't think any good spirits can be born naturally here. I will obey your command, Father God. Lowering his head slightly, Hypnos softly expressed his submission. Although everything below the fifth level of the spiritual world seems a bit narrow for a true God-level being like him, he has no intention of rejecting it. Hypnos is not a being like Iclopus. He knows how to restrain his power and overcome his instincts. What's more, he didn't feel at all that Ryan was consulting with him. Very well, then do it. Lyanna. Nodding, Ryan called out to the goddess of the moon. I'm here, Your Highness. As before, the black clothes turned from virtual to real, and Lyanna quickly responded to Lion's call. He is the new god I created, Hypnos. In the future, he will be responsible for building the third spiritual world. She is Lyanna, my deputy. If you have anything you can ask her while I'm away. The third quarter moon hangs in the sky. Today, it is the turn of the third spiritual moon to illuminate the outside world. After introducing the two of them respectively, Ryan also felt a little emotional when he looked at the goddess of the moon who had been diligently taking care of the spiritual world for him over the past few hundred years. Even when he was still in the spirit world, he was often busy operating the rules and digesting the source power. In fact, the affairs of the spirit world have always been handled by Lyanna. Most of the spirit world creatures have never even seen Ryan. Just like what they call him, the great ancient spirit world will, in their view, Ryan's existence is just a legend and Lyanna is the ruler of the spirit world. Lyanna. The goddess in the black dress raised her head and met Ryan's eyes. Over the past 1,000 years, part of the element origin absorbed by the spirit world is gathering and forming in his hands, interweaving with spirituality into a multifaceted crystal. The power of element is very special, and it does not seem to have a real superior priesthood. Just like earth element, it is also affected by priesthoods such as earth, mountain, celestial body, magic, and witchcraft, but it does not completely belong to anyone. And it is very interesting that although in chaos, darkness is stronger than light, life is far better than death, and earth, water, wind and fire are not equal, the power of elements is not like this. They are opposite to each other, maintaining a dynamic balance, and seem to be completely unaffected by the strength of authority. And magic is a wonderful acquired product. It comes from the result of intelligent life using spirit to refine elements, and its own power is not constant. The purer the spirit of refining it, the stronger the magic. This is the power that originally belonged to the owner of Underworld Moon, but now, it will belong to the new owner of Underworld Moon. Lyanna, this is magic, Ryan said with a smile, it will become your moonlight. Strictly speaking, although Lyanna was called the goddess of Underworld Moon before, she actually only controlled the concept of Underworld Moon. Because the Underworld Moon at this time does not really exist, it is a projection of the spirit world in the underworld, and its moonlight is also illuminated by the 7 crescent moons in the spirit world in turn. But from now on, the Underworld Moon will also have its own moonlight. Serving you is the meaning of my existence. As the new multifaceted crystal merged into her body, Lyanna's breath became much heavier. Her divine power did not change, but the upper limit was raised again. As expected, as the underworld expands further, the threshold of powerful divine power will also be open to her. Even from the special nature of the Underworld Moon in the underworld, Lyanna may soon enter the realm of powerful divine power. At the same time, the originally cold light in the underworld also changed. The silver-white light turned into a dark purple hue, and the invisible power spread. Under such light, some corpses that were brought to the underworld but died for various reasons trembled faintly. Gradually, they seemed to give birth to new souls and burned in the form of flames. Soul fire, that's their name. When the fire goes out, it means that the rebirth of the undead is also coming to an end. Chapter 67 Secret Talk. Fire is the original one in the elemental realm under spirituality. Therefore, the new consciousness of the dead souls is also preserved in the fire of the soul. Although the undead have the word spirit, most of them are not spiritual bodies. They are essentially lives that exist in the material world. It's just that the bodies of normal life are living, while they are dead. But from another perspective, perhaps in the eyes of the undead, the bodies of life on earth are dead, and theirs might be alive. As time goes by, the number of undead gradually increases. Not only the corpses of life, but also places with dense negative energy will give birth to life under the light of the dark moon. A few intelligent beings bathe in the moonlight, and they regard the Pluto moon as the source of life. The undead call it the primordial moon, because in their vague memories, there is a moon on the earth, but it was born later than in the underworld. And most importantly, only the primordial moon can reverse life and death and bring them back to life. The initial celestial worship began to spread, and the meager power of faith flowed to the underworld. Ryan has noticed changes in the outside world, but like humans, before the Third Age, it was not the time for these mortal beings to appear. What's more, although the underworld has lost its ownership of the soul due to the existence of the spirit world, it is close to the source of chaos darkness and is naturally the home of the undead. Before, because of the lack of power in the moonlight of Pluto, they could not really come alive. But now, with the participation of magic, the spirit can easily influence matter with it, and the undead are born. It's just that when Ryan was arranging the affairs of the spiritual world that he had accumulated over the past 700 years, a secret conversation was going on in a place he didn't know, in a lightless realm. In the past, relying on the prophecy of the myth's trajectory, everything seemed to be within Ryan's expectation. He is like a player standing outside the world, gently pulling the strings of fate, and the gods are swung by him like puppets. But as the spiritual world becomes more powerful, uncertain fate interferes more and more with destiny. Even he himself doesn't know how many fateful trajectories have already changed. He saw some things, such as the changes in the starry sky, such as the changes in the God King, but in Ryan's eyes, these were all things he expected after all. But obviously, there were some things beyond his expectation, and the foreshadowing had been laid as early as the day when the spiritual world was opened. Not all gods will act the way they want. Some are due to pure emotions, while others are due to the desire to go further. The lightless realm, just like its name, here, everything is nothing. If there is not enough power, mortal things cannot even maintain their own existence here, because pure darkness will swallow all things. But for the two people talking at this moment, the danger of the lightless realm is just a joke. Gaia, you saw it. At the edge of the realm, beside the emerald green figure, a gentle and magnetic middle-aged male voice slowly came. If you just listen to the voice, I'm afraid everyone will think that this is a scholar who has poetry and books. Yes, Erebus, he created another god, and snatched it from the world. The spirit world. Through this interface, he can do many things beyond your imagination. Looking at the sudden change of moonlight in the sky, the woman in the green skirt did not hide her emotions, or she had never been good at hiding her emotions. She didn't like Ryan, always had. And thousands of years ago, when the life Aquarius with most of its origin missing was returned to the hands, this dislike turned into anger. At the first moment, Gaia wanted to take revenge and go back. As long as she thinks about it, the earth and the underworld will move accordingly, and all life with the aura of the spiritual world will be targeted by a part of this world, and this is just the beginning. She wanted to imprison Ryan deep in the earth and make him pay for his actions after he handed over half of his life authority. However, Erebus dissuaded her at that time. The Lord of Darkness told Gaia that when the spiritual world opens up, Ryan will no longer be imprisoned. He is one with the spiritual world, or in other words, he is the personification of the spiritual world, but unlike the original God, he is no longer the same as his original body. For Ryan, even if his external divine body is destroyed, he can be reborn in the interface at any time. The same is true for the lost part of life Aquarius. It has probably become a part of the spiritual world and can never be regained. Therefore, Gaia's anger, which had nowhere to vent, enveloped the earth for 3 years. But she did not give up revenge, but kept the anger brewing in her heart. You tried to persuade me then, Erebus, but you have called me here again today. If you have something on your mind, just say it. You have what you want, but I just want him to know that the earth is not so easy to deceive. The voice was a little cold, and Gaia knew that Erebus was not a kind person. The other person probably wants her to do something that only she can do. But Gaia didn't care. In later generations, she can help Zeus for the giants, or she can fall out with Zeus because of the titans who are imprisoned in the abyss. Throughout the process, she seemed to gain nothing and instead lost a lot of power. But this is Mother Earth. She rarely cares about interests when doing things and cares more about temporary emotions. As long as she can breathe out, she is willing to pay some extra costs. Don't say that, my dear sister, maybe I just want to help you. On the side, listening to Gaia's words, Erebus smiled. He seemed to be in a good mood today. But the face of the Earth Mother was still cold. If the other party really cared about him, he could have done so long ago when Uranus was still there. But he watched himself face the pain. The so-called care is simply a joke. On the other side, seeing that Gaia didn't mean to pay attention, Erebus didn't care. As the other party said, the reason why he found the other party was naturally because he couldn't do it himself. In the field of life, although the Earth Mother only relied on the power of the companion artifact, it was definitely not something that the Dark Lord could achieve. You know, Gaia, thousands of years ago, on the Earth, the gods created life. His right hand swept across the darkness in front of him, and the life in the underworld appeared in front of the 2 ancient gods. They were all created on that day and brought here. But ironically, they were already dead at this time, and the new life born on the corpse was active. They used your life bottle to give mortal bodies, and Ryan used well water to give mortal souls. Not surprisingly, the well that spread souls is a divine artifact made of life force, and it is originally integrated with the life bottle. Yes, Gaia said, I don't need you to remind me again how he used something that originally belonged to me to give me a soul. You misunderstood. I'm not laughing at you, in fact, I'm just emphasizing that in the field of life, the body and soul of mortals actually have intersections. Shaking his head, Erebus explained. But Gaia felt that he was just describing his failure in another way. So, what did you find? Gaia was already a little impatient. She never knew that her brother had such a bad personality in the past. Don't be impatient, my sister. Chuckling, Erebus looked at the wandering dead spirits in the picture and said slowly, I just discovered some secrets about life through the artifact of the 2-part division. Chapter 68 Lurking. You know, Gaia, all things need nutrients to grow. The world draws strength from its own cycle and void, and the gods draw strength from their corresponding symbols through the priesthood. The transformation of one quality into another equivalent exchange is the unchanging law of the world. So, listening to Erebus's words, Gaia frowned and said, Of course I know this. Even the plants I created need to draw nutrients from the earth. You don't need to teach me this. What does what you are talking about have to do with life and soul? Smiling slightly, Erebus still seemed unhurried. Perhaps due to the influence of the priesthood, the Dark Lord likes this feeling of secrets being revealed little by little. Really? Then tell me, my sister, plants draw nutrients from the earth, but where do the lives created by the gods get the power to maintain their existence? Didn't you see? Gaia thought this was another meaningless question. They eat plants or each other. They drink water to promote the balance of elements in their bodies. Is there anything wrong with that? Of course not. Erebus said briefly, if life cannot be divided, then I think this is normal. But since the body and soul can exist independently, why can one life eat other lives? What about the body and its soul that does not eat the souls of other living beings? If the soul does not have the process of eating, where does it get nutrients from? Gaia was silent. She already vaguely understood what the other party wanted to say. The nourishment for the growth of the body is water and plants, but the nourishment for the growth of the soul is the body itself. It doesn't need anything else. Erebus's eyes were a little deep under the warmth of the body. It directly borrows the intersection of the two in the life field and directly obtains power from the former. And as time goes by, the body will develop, mature, and age, and so will the soul, but the latter cycle is longer than the former. So in the end, they will come back together and become part of that world, and you know what that means. It means that every soul is a seed, and the material world is the soil where it germinates. When a life body comes to an end, the fruit called soul mature. Mother Earth said slowly. She was also a little shocked. Chaos draws power from chaos, transforms it into ownerless power, and then continuously improves the world. The spiritual world uses the present world as chaos, absorbs power from it, and constantly improves itself. Faintly, Gaia seemed to see the day at the end of time when the spiritual world and the real world would keep pace with each other. From the perspective of chaos itself, it is difficult to say whether this is good or bad, because the power of spirituality itself is also strengthening the effect of circulation within the world. But this is certainly not good news for this world that prefers materiality and order. Just as the world is getting stronger, the power of Mother Earth is getting weaker and weaker. Gaia understands this very well. No, suddenly, Mother Earth reacted, with these beings and their weak nature, even if the number expands tens of millions or even more, even if they are spread all over the Earth, this is not a big deal for chaos. It's nothing. Stop being alarmist, Erebus. What exactly do you want me to do? He raised his eyebrows and looked at his sister's reaction. The Lord of Darkness was still a little disappointed. When he first discovered this, he was really shocked, but later he realized that absorbing power in this way was like scooping water from the sea with a basin, and it was an ocean where big rivers were constantly flowing. Unless the number of intelligent life forms is in the hundreds of millions, and unless their life level can be raised by more than one level, it may sound good, but it is actually meaningless. The power derived from the self-operation of this world in one day is more than what the souls of today's mortal objects can transform in 100 years. It's very simple. Next time, he said, when this batch of life dies and the next time life is created, I want you to add this to the mix. Stretching out his hand, a mass of amorphous black energy swayed in Erebus's palm. At first, Earth Mother did not recognize it, but soon she realized its essence. That is darkness in terms of quantity. It is very weak, so weak that even the power of the regional gods is stronger than it. But it is also pure, because it comes directly from the essence of the original god. Dark Erebus, I don't care if I'm a knife for you once, but I hope you can think of a more reasonable way. I can do it by combining it with the original liquid in the life Aquarius, but if life comes into direct contact with the source power, madness is their only end. Do you think he can't see such an obvious change? A little disappointed, Gaia didn't expect that her brother would come up with such a method. So I ask you to dilute it as much as possible, Erebus said calmly, just like a drop of divine power sinking into the ocean. As long as the amount is small enough, there will be no problem. Of course, due to its nature, the thinking of living beings may be distorted, but their sanity will not be completely destroyed. Just find a reason. For example, you created humans with only positive emotions before, and now you have to go the other way and create humans with more negative emotions. Do you need me to teach you about this? I understand, but can you help me deal with him? Mother Earth nodded hesitantly, but she was a little confused. She could see that the other party was using this method to infiltrate his power into the spirit world, but what threat could this pose to Ryan? This little bit of power would not be taken seriously by any god above the medium level, let alone Ryan, who was in the spirit world. In the outside world, the power of God would limit his power. But in the spirit world, the interface itself is his power. Don't you understand, my dear sister? God is immortal. So if you want to deal with him, you must first understand him and how to target his world. Erebus was speechless. Although he didn't understand the meaning of simply venting his anger, he was still patient in order to get Gaia's help. After all, he really knew nothing in the field of life. When my source power entered the spirit world, I didn't expect it to come back, but it was just a tiny bit anyway, and the soul of a mortal can only carry so much. Leon harvested power through the soul, so he must return the soul to its source, which must be done through the source of the spirit world. This is my goal. I want a part of me to touch the root of the spirit world. Erebus looked directly at his sister. Then I will know how the spirit world was opened up. No one will tell the truth to an uninvited guest, Gaia, so I never believed Ryan's explanation to me. I don't want him to tell me anything, I just want to see it with my own eyes. Of course, at that point, Ryan will definitely notice my actions. He will intercept the source power, but I will get the hope of getting rid of chaos, and you can also know his weaknesses. Chapter 69 Cracks. Looking at his sister who was gradually moved, the Dark Lord couldn't help but sneer in his heart. Weakness. Let's not talk about whether the world has weaknesses or not. Even if there are, Erebus will never tell it. He himself also wants to take this step. If he can create the world successfully, he will not have enough time to cover it up, so how can he allow others to know the secret? Anyway, Ryan is a smart man. Even if the other party suffers a loss, he will definitely not tell it. He has even thought about it. If he can also open up the world, although he will conflict with Ryan and snatch the power that has not yet been owned by him, they may become allies in fighting against the present world. On the side, for some reason, after listening to her brother's explanation, Gaia's first reaction was not the cleverness of the other party's calculations or the gains after success, but that Ryan or Erebus seemed to be a little out of tune with chaos gods. In her impression, the gods would fight if they could beat them, and if they couldn't beat them, they would pull allies to fight. At most, they would use some strategies to win over helpers, or sneak attacks or something. Erebus's approach is indeed rare. I will. The Earth Mother finally said, if Kronos does not want to create a second generation of humans, then I will lead it. He has disregarded my wishes and is still unwilling to release Oranides and Cyclops from the abyss, so I don't care about his thoughts. I will do as you ask, but whether it will be as you want in the end has nothing to do with me. Hearing this, Erebus nodded, and he finally convinced Gaia. He actually did not dare to guarantee that this attempt would succeed, but this was the only way he could think of. Soon, Gaia left with that power, and the Dark Lord, after watching the Earth Mother leave, stood at the edge of the domain, looking at the land of eternal night that enveloped the other half of the underworld. Compared to Gaia, he actually wanted to join forces with Nyx. If the power of secret could also be added, it would be foolproof. But he also knew that if his sister really had limited means, then his sister was simply not interested in these. She did not have such a strong desire to become stronger. If possible, she can even stay at home alone until the end of time. It would be great if she could get rid of chaos control, but it doesn't matter if she can't anyway as a primitive god, as long as she is not completely personified like Gaia, she will never completely fall from the realm of great divine power. Erebus understands this idea very well, because he thought so a long time ago. If Ryan hadn't appeared, he would probably stay alone in the lightless realm, watching the changes in the outside world until the end of time. I hope it will succeed. But if it fails, it can also be accepted. As an eternal person, I still have many opportunities. Shaking his head slightly, for Erebus, the biggest price of a failed action is to arouse Ryan's vigilance. But as long as you act, there will be consequences. In any case, the Dark Lord is ready for another enemy. Even after the source of power is touched, whether he achieves the result he wants or not, he will regard Ryan as his opponent. But before that, he still has something to do. Come minus minus. With a clear shout, the next moment, in his own body, Erebus truly mobilized the power of great divine power. Under the power of the ancient god of creation, everything that happened today was swallowed up by darkness and turned into the secret itself. Even fate was excluded to a certain extent. Minus minus. He was a little out of breath. Even in his own body, it was a big burden to exert this level of power. Pure power would not bring him pressure, but the position that was enough to interfere with fate to a certain extent was the real difficulty. I hope the harvest will be worthy of my efforts. Standing on the edge of the lightless realm, Erebus began to look forward to the results of his plan. Since Ryan returned to the spirit world, another 500 years have passed. During these 500 years, the situation in chaos has changed rapidly. The war in the sky is coming to an end, although Kronos has temporarily suspended his offensive because of Ryan's return and the changes in the Dark Moon. But after decades, when they found that there was no other movement in the underworld, the war was reignited. Now, more than 70% of the starry sky have expressed their submission to the God King, and the star gods in those star fields have also defected. The remaining places, except for the territory left to the celestial god Cuius, are the only places left for Hyperion. Only in the area near the sun, the power of the sun god is unprecedentedly strong there, so the queen of gods and the god of weather have to slow down there. On the other hand, on the sea gods also experienced the power of strategy for the first time. It is difficult to determine the winner of the battle between powerful gods, but under the command of Metis, the ocean god system has made rapid progress in other places. They avoided the battlefield of the four main gods and squeezed the territory of the gods near the sea everywhere. Several descendants of Pontos are exhausted, but they are always one step behind. If it were not for the gradual cessation of the war in the starry sky, I am afraid that Pontos would find it difficult to maintain even the last part in the competition for the unknown sea area. After this incident, the name of wisdom Metis resounded throughout the land and sea. In view of the consistent tradition of the oceanic god system, many gods came to express their feelings to her, but the goddess of wisdom rejected them one by one. Compared to the gods, she preferred to stay with the golden humans who survived the war of gods. She gave them the hydrology she created, so that they could understand the ocean currents and climate on the sea. As a result, the humans on the ocean left traces that were completely different from those on the earth. Under such circumstances, the second daughter of Cuius, the daughter of Asteria, the god of meteors, and Persis, the god of material destruction, was born in the starry sky. It was also because of her birth that the originally harmonious cooperative relationship between Cuius and the king of gods suddenly cracked. Chapter 70 The Goddess Abandoned by the World. On Mount Odals, in the palace of the god king, the gods sat in a circle, and the atmosphere was a little depressing. The newborn baby was placed on the long table in the center. Except for the goddess of the star and her sister, the relatives of both sides of the baby girl were present. On the main seat, Kronos glanced at the gods present and couldn't help but curse his luck. Obviously, in another 100 years, at most 200 or 300 years, when Crius stabilized his rule over most of the starry sky and let the star gods sort out the energy tides brought by the war of gods, his position as the king of gods would rise accordingly. But it was at this time that problems arose between the god of weather and his greatest helper. Cuius had no intention of participating in the disputes in the starry sky. Just like his priesthood, the god of lightless celestial bodies. He did not desire brilliant light, but his wife Phoebe was different. Under the persuasion of the god of light bodies, he still joined the war in the name of the relationship between his second daughter and Persis, the son of Crius. Although they did not use their full strength, the couple of coups only confronted Thea, the goddess of light and vision, and did not even fight, but this was the key to the victory or defeat of this war. But everything will end. If the current problem cannot be solved, even Phoebe will put away his little thoughts and cut off all ties with the lineage of the god king. Her name is Hecate, right? As if she felt the solemn atmosphere and her husband's mood, the queen of heaven Rhea spoke to break the calm. She looks very cute. She will definitely be a beautiful goddess when she grows up. The Queen of Heaven's voice fell, but no one responded. Kronos' heart gradually sank. He knew that even Crius regretted his behavior at this moment. After all, the gods are immortal and the divine power is eternal, but all this is a joke in front of chaos. Although I haven't heard of any gods being killed by the world, many of them have personally experienced the scene of the birth of new gods tearing the priesthood. Even at this moment, even Kronos himself was not without fear of the baby girl in front of him. This is the first case of a god without a priesthood since chaos created the world. Even those regional gods that Ryan jokingly called divine power level 0 still have a river, a spring, a small celestial body, or a hill as their own domain. Although these objectively existing things are not as eternal as the laws of nature, they are enough to provide them with divine power to maintain the existence of their bodies. But the baby girl in front of him is different. Even as the king of gods, Kronos can't feel that she has any connection with anything. A god without a source of divine power means that if she uses 1 point of her power, she will lose 1 point. It only takes a little slight damage for her to fall into eternal sleep like the death of mortals. This is why the true gods don't take regional gods seriously. Once the region they rely on is destroyed, when the remaining divine power is exhausted, even if they are still alive in concept, it is no different from death. And the Hecate in front of him is even better. Apart from her immortal nature, she is no different from humans on Earth. Caius, she has no priesthood, but I can try to give her one. With a somewhat hesitant tone, Kronos looked at the god of the celestial body. Although this priesthood may only rely on the power of the god king, at least minus. This is not a question of priesthood, your majesty, this is a warning to the world. Perses suddenly spoke. The atmosphere in the field solidified instantly. Although everyone had this idea before, no one said it out loud, but Perses didn't care. As the god of material destruction, Hecate's biological father, although he is still very weak now, he was originally expected to have a strong divine power. But because of the instructions of his father and the god king, he was forced to get together with a meteor goddess of divine power level 2. He didn't know that in the original myth, he would be moved by the other party after a long contact. But now, perhaps because of the rebellion under oppression, he and Asteria are disgusted with each other. Your Majesty, please forgive me for being blunt. He looked at Kronos respectfully, but said something heartbreaking. Perhaps the world does not want a king who rules everything. Just like the Heavenly Father, power only brings pain, so he sent this child to tell us that all this is a mistake minus. Boom! Invisible oppression fell on him. That was not the power of the God King, but came from his father-in-law. The celestial god, who had always been taciturn, showed his power in front of the second generation of Titans for the first time. Perseus' words were blocked in his mouth and he could no longer speak. In chaos, except for life and death, the power of the dark side is always stronger than the light side. Even Kronos suddenly realized that this silent brother had actually reached this step silently. Perseus, I know you have always looked down on Asteria. Whose voice was not loud, but steady and powerful. Since you are so disgusted with your wife under your power, let's stop here. But from today on, the starry sky no longer welcomes you. Huh? The pressure dissipated and Perseus gasped. He looked at his father, but the god of weather said nothing. Not to mention that he had spoken arrogantly in front of the god king before. Crius himself was far from being a match for Caius. In terms of combat, weather also only relies on part of the power of wind. Later thunder did expand its range, but it had a master on the day it was born. As one of the few Titan gods imprisoned in Tartarus, Crius's fate was not without reason. Okay, I just spoke out of turn, His Highness Caius, and His Majesty the God King, but minus. Looking around, Perseus was not surprised that he did not get any support. He calmed down a little and said lightly, but as the father of such a sinful god, I am deeply uneasy. In the future, the affairs of the god's court will have nothing to do with me. I plan to go to the underworld, of course, or the sea. The god of destruction was fearless. After saying that, he turned around and left, not caring about the faces of the gods behind him. His eyes narrowed slightly, and the void stagnated. Kronos was a little angry at the arrogance of the gods in front of him. But until the other party left the temple, he did not express anything extra. If it were another time, he would never allow the other party to be so presumptuous. But at this moment, as the leader of the relationship between the other party and the goddess of Liuxing, he still tolerated Persis. Chapter 71 Exile. A warning from the world. The God King was warned by the world. In this chaos world that has been accelerated by Ryan, this is a reward that even Uranus has not had time to enjoy. At this moment, even Kronos himself began to wonder whether chaos really didn't want him to interfere in the starry sky, so the world without subjective consciousness used such a special god to warn him. Even looking at the baby girl in front of him, if it weren't for the fact that she didn't have the special appearance of the 100-armed giant, Kronos was not sure whether she was a god. Kronos, I'm sorry, but I may have to live in seclusion for a while. In the stiff atmosphere, the god of the celestial body spoke again. Hearing this, the God King's face changed slightly, and Phoebe beside him also opened his mouth, but in the end he didn't say anything. It's true that she longed for brilliance, but she knew that the most fundamental reason why she was valued by the God King was her husband. Now that the other party has made a decision, she will no longer be stubborn. Your Majesty, she then said, as my husband said, I'm afraid we have to withdraw from this dispute. If you still want to continue to attack the starry sky, I suggest you make plans early. Okay. After a moment of silence, Kronos took a deep breath and finally accepted it. After all, helping Kronos control the starry sky actually has no obvious benefits for Kuz. He was unwilling to continue at the risk of offending the laws of the world, and the God King was not surprised. Just thinking that his cruel father had never had such an experience, Kronos couldn't help but feel a little irritated. He even became a little dissatisfied with the world itself. First, a tyrant was chosen, and after he succeeded to the throne, it would only cause him trouble. Kronos couldn't figure out what he, the God King, had done wrong. He had never destroyed the order of the world, but instead continued to add bricks and tiles to it. Before today, I didn't expect this to happen, he said, but this child minus. Lock her in the abyss, Kronos. The goddess of light said coldly, she has no divine office, and nothing will happen even if she is locked up. Let her sleep there forever. Now the relationship between Asteria and Persis can be declared over, and Phoebe's hope of being like her sister Thea is also over, all because of the birth of this child. As a god of chaos, the parent-child relationship may not be stable, and the generations are no different from strangers. Phoebe only has disgust for his granddaughter. Forget it, Phoebe. Shaking his head, Chaos dissuaded his wife. He remembered the request of his second daughter before coming to the Mountain of Gods. Although she didn't like her relationship with Persis and didn't like this child, looking at the innocent big eyes of the baby, she still asked her father not to lock her in the abyss. Exile her, let her go to the earth and fend for herself. Her meager divine power is almost nothing. As a new generation of gods, she will not remember what happened when she was born. Let her think that she is a mortal created by the gods and live in the mortal world. What do you think, Crius? As he said, Crius glanced at his former in-laws. Of course, my brother, let's do as you say. Crius naturally had no reason to object. He also had no feelings for this new god named Hecate. As a god, the only reaction of the law when she was born was to declare her real name. The god of weather had no interest in such offspring. Looking at his two brothers, since the conclusion had been made, Kronos no longer hesitated. He mobilized the authority of the God King, and a powerful force close to the 20th level of divine power surged in him. No matter what the birth of this child meant, he had to tell his brothers that his position as the God King had only increased and not decreased compared to the past. In the name of the God King minus. Gently raising the scepter in his hand, the three gems sparkled. As Kronos expected, the other four titans present breathed a sigh of relief as they felt the God King's power showing no signs of weakening. Whether or not the laws of the world were dissatisfied, since the God King who started the culprit was safe and sound, they would naturally not have any more serious consequences. This made the god of weather give up the idea of leaving the sacred mountain. He was not a subordinate of Kronos, and if things were not harmonious, he could choose to leave at any time. Daughter of Persis and Asteria, Hecate, born on the day of the spirit number, your existence blasphemes the majesty of the gods and brings shame to the gods. Now, in the name of the King of Gods, I expel you from the gods, and from now on, you are no longer a member of the Titans. From today on, you will only be able to associate with mortals. The realm of gods will close the door to you. Atone for your sins in eternal life, this is my final judgment on you. The majestic voice echoed in the hall. This voice came from Mount Odalus, but was firmly confined to the nearby sky. The next moment, wrapped in divine power, the baby girl in front of her flew directly from the mountain of gods and fell to the earth. The divine power collided with the airflow, and the light and heat made the stream of light turn fiery red. It fell from the sky to the earth, indicating that the gods had fallen into the mortal world. Cohen, the leader of mankind, my servant. Cronus did not speak, but his voice turned to the earth invisibly. In order to ensure that nothing else happened to this unexpected product, Cronus threw her directly towards the human tribe near the sacred mountain, and used his divine power to send orders to the human leaders. He has done so more than once in the past. Unlike the gods, humans always regard his will as the supreme glory. She was born because of the gods, but she is also disgusted by the gods. She is Hecate, an unclean sinner. She will live with humans from now on, but no one is allowed to communicate with her privately without permission. The command metaphor spread to the ground and reached the ears of humans dressed in sackcloth in front of the temple. Thousands of years have passed and Cohen's appearance remains the same, showing no sign of aging. He was not frightened by the sound in his ears. He watched the sparks fall from the sky and fall in front of the temple. The remaining heat melted a hole in the stone slab in front of the temple door. When the flames and high temperature dissipated, a young life that had never been seen before appeared there. She was bathed in flames but unscathed. Without any extra emotion, Cohen just prostrated on the ground and prayed to the gods as always. As you command, great king of the gods. Facing the oracle, golden humans do not need to think. Whatever God says is right. Just like fire falling from the sky, there will be disaster. Chapter 72, Fire Falls from the Sky. Kneeling in front of the temple and praying silently for a long time, Cohen stood up. He looked at the baby girl in front of him and held up the swaddling clothes wrapped around her with both hands. It was created by the power of Leto, the goddess of care and protection, the sister of Asteria. Compared with other gods, Leto and the goddess of meteors still have a little pity for Hecate, but that's all. Out of fear of the laws of the world, the two goddesses also regard her as a disaster. Star. Just like in Ryan's previous life, all things will fear fire, storms and scorching sun, but in fact they have no consciousness of their own. Similarly, the gods of chaos will also be afraid, even if the will that makes them afraid has never cast even a moment of gaze on Hecate. Fear comes from the unknown. Since the opening of chaos, the only one who has a deep understanding of the operating logic of the world, except Ryan who opened up the spiritual world, is the original god. Obviously, the meager affection between the gods is not enough for them to face fear directly. Hecate, is that her name? Sighing, as the first species created, humans are born adults, and Cohen didn't know that the baby in front of him could actually grow up. Cohen couldn't bear to see such a harmless creature being identified as a sinner. But golden humans would not question God, so he just thought that his ideas were not in place. As if sensing something, Hecate, who was only half a day old, turned her big black eyes and stared at Cohen who was holding her up and giggled. Obviously, the young god didn't seem to know that his fate had just changed suddenly. When fire falls from the sky, there will be disasters. I just don't know where this disaster will happen. The gods fought in the sky, which mortals could not observe and understand. But whenever the stars were shattered, the fragments that fell into the mortal world would always bring disasters. In addition, the shattering of stars often means that a star god has lost his sustenance and is about to fall into eternal sleep. So in the past, the gods also told humans that when there was a flash of fire on the horizon, an unknown disaster would happen in a corner of the world. Hecate was born from the light and was born from fire, and she herself was rejected by the gods. Cohen didn't know where the disaster came from, but it came from the nature of the golden humans, which made him worried. He shook his head, and the most urgent thing was to execute the order of the God King. Cohen turned around and looked at the golden humans who were attracted by the vision and gathered around. King, has the great God King conveyed the oracle to you again? Someone in the crowd asked. Seeing this, people looked at Cohen. They were a little envious. After all, for humans in the Golden Age, listening to the oracle was the greatest honor. Yes. Nodding slightly, Cohen raised the swaddling clothes in his hand. His eyes slowly swept across the crowd and looked at every human being. Her name is Hecate, and she is another creature created by God. Facing the crowd, Cohen said seriously, but she was born guilty, and the gods are dissatisfied with this. Hearing this, there was some commotion in the crowd, but it soon calmed down. The innate reverence for God made them instinctively dislike this life they had never seen before, but humans in the Golden Age had no negative emotions, so they could not have any hateful feelings towards her. However, the will of God is above everything else. No matter what they think, in front of the decree of the King of Gods, humans will choose to obey. The great King of the Gods, Kronos, who dominates everything on Mount Oedolus, issued an order. He ordered her to live with us, but no one could communicate with her without permission. From this moment on, no one is allowed to talk about her relationship with the gods. I will build a house for this life at the farthest place from the temple. What about food? Someone asked, what does she eat, and what do we need to prepare for her? No, Cohen shook his head and said, she doesn't need food or water. Although she will feel hungry, it won't kill her. Let her fend for herself. I think the physical suffering must be a punishment from the gods, and we should obey. Make sure she is not harmed by other lives, but that's all. Apart from that, we shouldn't do anything. Watching the suffering of others is not an easy decision for the golden humans. But if this is the will of the gods, it is not difficult to accept. Since the gods don't allow us to reveal her past, do I need to record what happened today? Another person asked. That is Hua, the person in charge of recording history among the golden humans. In the beginning, humans engraved every communication with God on the pillars of the temple. Later, when the pillars were full of inscriptions, they recorded it on huge stone slabs. Humans originated from God, and the existing civilization came from civilization slabs, so they imitated the stone slabs and set them up in front of every temple to record the past with pictures and words. Record it, but don't record the part related to God. After hesitating for a while, Cohen finally decided, Hecate, the original sinner born from the light of heaven and the fire, came to the world on the night of the spirit number, and her existence will bring disaster to the world. But remember, Hua, all this is human judgment, and has nothing to do with God. Okay. Hearing this, Hua nodded. Humans are not eternal, he knows this. Compared with human lifespan, stones will exist longer. Putting these stone tablets with historical records in front of the temple was Hua's way of expressing respect to the gods in his own way. After solving the problems of several people, Cohen waved his hand and dismissed the humans around him when he saw that no one on the scene had any objections. Turning around, he placed Hecate in front of the temple, asked someone to take good care of her, and then took only 2 people and walked towards a forest in the distance. That was one of the places where the golden humans got water. He planned to build a residence for this creature that fell from the sky in the center of the forest, near the stream. God did not ask him to provide food for Hecate, but the nature of the golden humans made it difficult for him to sit back and watch the suffering of other lives, so Cohen decided to build a residence there. If this life has wisdom and knows how to learn, then she can find food in the forest and get drinking water from the river by herself. But if she is as ignorant as those lives that were also created by God but are far less capable of thinking than humans, then it is her fate. Just like worshipping God, the golden humans also fear fate. According to the few words they learned from the gods, they knew that fate and wisdom seemed to be closely related. If Hecate had no wisdom, it meant that she was also rejected by fate, and suffering was her only ending. Chapter 73 The God Who Grew Up in the Human World. Since the night of the spiritual number, the sky was filled with fire, and in a blink of an eye, more than 70 years have passed. Time has passed quickly, but for humans, except that the frequency of abnormal flashing of the sun has increased, and the scene of falling stars has become more and more frequent, there has been no change around Mount Oedolus. The environment has not changed because it is affected by the power of the sacred mountain, and the scenery remains the same all year round. Humans have not changed, naturally, because humans in the Golden Age are like this. If there had not been that unexpected dream, perhaps until they die, they will not be any different from when they were born. However, there are some surprises in the monotonous life. The creature that was once brought to the human tribe has gradually grown up. She has a god-like appearance, but she is different from humans. Humans are like male gods, and she is like a goddess, although she is a goddess who never grows up. Although humans never communicate with her according to the order of the God King, as time goes by, some special things about her will inevitably spread among humans. The sinner who steals the authority of the gods, this is how humans call her and the power she controls. Like the record of Hecate's advent, this was recorded on the stone slab and remained forever in front of the temple. Shasha. Shasha. Walking barefoot on the leaves in the forest, listening to the sound of the wind blowing through the leaves. Hecate, with red hair and red skirt, walked briskly along the stream, towards the cabin where she lived. La la la, I can finally go back. Humming a little tune, Hecate finished a morning of practice by the woods, and she was in a good mood. Or, except for her childhood, Hecate was always in a good mood. She was not tall, and according to the standards of later generations, she was about 1.5 meters tall. But with her tender cheeks, she didn't look abrupt. Perhaps it was because of the lack of divine power, or perhaps some other reason. In short, it took a full 50 years for this original goddess of the fork in the road, the lord of the dead souls, and the sub-king of the underworld in the myth to finally enter the stage of rapid growth of the gods. Then more than 20 years passed, and Hecate's appearance remained at the age of 14 or 15, with no signs of growing up. Uncle Cohen, it's you again. After walking a little further, Cohen was standing next to a large barrel that was difficult for one person to hug at the corner of the stream not far away, scooping water from it with a wooden spoon. However, Cohen only moved his eyes to Hecate's greeting, and then there was no other response. Aren't you the king of mankind? Why do you have to fetch water yourself every time? Hecate was not surprised that she didn't get a response, she just continued to ask. Cohen remained silent. The king of gods on the sacred mountain is not like this. He has nymphs and oak goddesses to do things for him. The king of gods can instruct other gods, why can't you? Although Cohen wanted to say, you haven't been to the sacred mountain, why do you know the affairs of gods? Besides, gods and humans are different, and the king of gods is supreme, but he still didn't respond because of Kronos' oracle. And in fact, from the bottom of his heart, he felt that if what Hecate said was true, it would not be unreasonable. After all, human beings worship God equally, which is a concept written into their souls when they were created. They respect the god king more, not because of their nature, but because other gods worship Kronos as their king. So for the matter of gods serving other gods, humans still can't understand it very well. Like the humans on the sea, in their eyes, there is no difference between the god king and the sea gods. So slow minus. After watching for a while, Hecate became a little impatient. Although she has gradually gotten used to it over the years, in her opinion, many of the other parties' behaviors are still unacceptable. For example, since you can walk with a wooden bucket, why do you still need to use such a small wooden spoon? For example, she clearly tried to teach them other knowledge, but no one accepted it. For example, they can build a temple as big as a hill, but they are unwilling to dig a river to divert water from other places to the settlement. Hecate did ask, but no one responded to her. She also secretly listened to their conversations, but humans seemed to be accustomed to it. In private words, they would use the knowledge taught by the gods, and would not learn things of unknown origin. In other words, what Hecate could invent was rejected by the golden humans. Creation, that is the domain of the gods. No matter what is created, it is not something that mortals can do. So gradually, people thought that the reason why she was rejected by the gods was because she offended the authority of the gods. Forget it, I will help you. Ignoring Cohen's silent refusal, Hecate stretched out her little hand. She made a snatching motion, and an invisible force moved with it. In an instant, under the filling of something in the air, the force formed a big hand composed of a force field. But all this is invisible to the naked eye. The water in the stream seemed to be pulled by some force and flowed out of the shallow and narrow river channel. In a few breaths, the wooden barrel was filled. Okay, Uncle Cohen, your bucket is full. I'm going back. Clapping her hands, knowing that the other party would not have any response, Hecate just smiled, then walked around Cohen and continued to walk towards her residence. Behind him, Cohen looked at the fiery red figure going away, frowned slightly, but still said nothing. This strange power again. About 30 years ago, this life that fell from the sky suddenly mastered the power to influence nature. Although her power is still very weak, far from the supreme power of the gods, many things, having, is itself a blasphemy. Sinner. Stole the power of God? Shaking his head, Cohen picked up the barrel and walked towards the settlement. This heavy bucket that 10 people couldn't lift in the future was like nothing to Cohen. His power is close to the peak of ordinary things, and even if there is a proper method, the extraordinary realm can't stop him at all. But there is no way to practice in the world now, and even if there is, the golden humans don't care about power. So thousands of years ago, Cohen already had such a physique, but today, thousands of years later, he has not changed much. Passing by 7 fruit trees and avoiding 3 docile animal nests, the woods gradually became sparse. In the center of the woods that Hecate named Red Leaf Forest, the cabin she built on the open ground was already in sight. The cabin was originally built by Cohen, but Hecate later renovated it. She decorated the outside with flowers and colorful stones and used magic to keep them evergreen all year round. Squeaky. I'm back. Pushing the door open, Hecate greeted the empty cabin. But no one responded to her. Just like the past few decades, no one except herself has ever set foot in this place. Prepared a dinner for herself, some wild fruits picked on the roadside. Hecate returned to her bedroom and prepared to start the most anticipated part of the day. Except for the first generation of Titans, no one is born knowing, and Hecate is no exception, but she has a little secret that she has never told anyone. In the second year after she secretly learned to write, on the way back to the cabin, she picked up a treasure. Chapter 74 Meditation. It was a night with stars but no moon. The brightest star, whose name no one knew, shone particularly brightly on that day. According to the calendar circulated among humans, Hecate knew that it was the day of her birth. Unlike other times, the spiritual day only occurs once every 4 years, and on that day, the moon in the sky is always missing. Some gods once said that the day symbolizes the birth of evil. Some gods also said that the day was related to the creator of mankind. But Hecate didn't care about this, so when the golden humans gathered in front of the temple to worship the gods, she secretly ran to other places to watch the stone tablets that recorded the history. Usually, humans did not allow her to approach the temple, because it was a blasphemy to let the people abandoned by the gods approach the place where the gods were worshipped. However, when the golden humans finished their sacrifice on the way back, Hecate, who was in a hurry, was tripped by a hard object and then found this magical treasure. She had seen this treasure many times, but none of them was a real treasure. Slate, do you have a story to tell me today? In the narrow hut, Hecate held something that looked familiar and talked to herself. Are there really people who don't respect the gods in this world? I feel that the people in your story are completely different from Uncle Cohen and his friends. However, the slate remained the same without any other reaction. No, even though I'm grown up, can't I listen to stories when I grow up minus. The little girl was a little unhappy, but she still accepted the reality. After all, she hadn't seen many interesting stories on the slate in recent years. You should meditate. There was no sound, no light and shadow, the ink merged and reorganized, and a line of handwriting slowly emerged from the slate. Today is the day for you to break through the 5th level, and it is also the first step into the transcendent. For the divine, everything cannot be damaged, only the power baptized by the rules can cause substantial damage to them. I know, why are you urging me? What level? It's enough to have hands. Hecate pouted, but she still carefully placed the stone slab beside the bed. When she first saw it, this broken stone slab with a yellowing surface was as tall as a person, but in her hands, it became the most suitable size for her to carry. Hecate didn't know where it came from, but she had some guesses. Because of the same style, she has seen too many of them in these years. It's really troublesome, but as you said, when I enter the transcendent, I won't need the assistance of rituals anymore. Muttering and standing up, Hecate took out several bottles and jars from the corner of the room. The style was very rough, and it was marked with plant juices of different colors. She used a special method to burn it with mud. She had wanted to give this technology to humans, but they refused to accept it. In this era, humans did not have the ability to make fire on their own. This kind of thing made of fire was naturally regarded as a symbol of stealing divine power. Picking up the small bottles one by one, Hecate poured some liquid out of them. She mixed them in a small bowl according to the proportion and stirred them counterclockwise for 3.5 weeks with the stem of the moon soul flower. She added 1 part of rain water, symbolizing wind, 2 parts of steamed water, symbolizing fire, and 3 parts of river water and 4 parts of spring water, symbolizing water and earth respectively. This is just the most rudimentary method. Just like what she learned, incense and feathers of special life are more suitable for embodying wind, representing communication, planning and thinking. Candles and scepters are more suitable for representing fire, representing execution, initiative and willpower. But now there are no corresponding conditions, or in other words, things like incense, except Hecate herself. Even the gods on the sacred mountain have never heard of it, so she has always replaced it this way. In addition to materials, in the field of spiritual numbers, 3 and 7 have special meanings. Therefore, Hecate took half of 7 and used the reverse method to symbolize the opposite of the material. These are all efficient ways to use inferior materials. If the materials themselves have extraordinary power, she doesn't need to make it so complicated. After the liquid was mixed, she waited for a while until the liquid in the small bowl was mixed and gradually turned into a strange color. From the shelf next to her, Hecate took out a pen made of animal hair and branches, which was used to draw symbols and patterns. No matter how many times you look at it, you feel that this color is a bit strange. Looking at the colorful black in the bowl, Hecate complained. But there is no way. After the spiritual blending of earth, water, wind and fire, it represents 1/3 of chaos in the mysterious field. So it doesn't matter what color this liquid is originally. Anyway, it looks like this color. Picking up the pen, dipped a little in the liquid in the bowl, Hecate walked to the door. She drew a special symbol on the ground. When the words were written, an invisible force was triggered. It is said that these are words that have evolved from the original spiritual text. They are not as powerful as the source, but they can also be used by mortals. And this one written by Hecate means isolation. Then, she wrote symbols representing connection, purification and sublimation on the other 3 sides in turn. When everything was finished, she connected the 4 points with a line and stood in the center. Alpha Psi. Opening his mouth slightly, accompanied by 2 special bites, the power in the 4 runes was linked. There are 3 different types of rituals. One is the imitation of history, one is the touch of rules, and the last one is to please the high-ranking people. Let's not talk about the other 2. What Hecate is preparing now is the second ritual. As the ritual runs, the rules that have been written in are touched. Indistinctly, Hecate feels that a vast world appears in her spiritual perception. That is the spiritual world, an interface composed of spiritual power. However, at this time point, without special methods, no existence can establish a connection with the spiritual world. But obviously, Hecate's incomplete ritual is one of the special methods. Sitting cross-legged on the ground with her eyes slightly closed, Hecate mobilized her spirit. She followed the induction in the dark and connected to the vast spiritual world. Countless weird lights and shadows flashed and strange sounds sounded, but they were all purified one by one and then isolated. When everything returned to calm in Hecate's spiritual ocean, there were only 7 moon phases reflecting on her illusory spirit. At the same time, on the surface of Hecate's spirit, there were also moon phases. However, only 4 were real, and the remaining 3 were only virtual. Chapter 76 Legend. 7-phase meditation. This is the special knowledge Hecate learned from the stone tablet. According to the stone tablet, meditation is a way to subtly enhance the spirit of mortals through the influence of higher beings. This higher being can be a life, an object, or a concept. It can be sought outside or inside. Of course, meditation is not just a fantasy. Only the right method can increase and purify the spirit of the meditator while ensuring one's own safety. Like the 7-phase meditation, it is a way to receive the moonlight of the 7th month in the spiritual world so as to absorb spiritual power and strengthen oneself. Simple name, real effect. Now Hecate has condensed 4 phases of the moon, which means that she has stood at the top of mortals. The next step is the realm of the extraordinary. The extraordinary is not equal to God, but only the extraordinary can touch the law. No matter how powerful the power of mortals is, it is meaningless in front of the power of God. Only by touching the law can real and effective damage be caused. Spirituality comes from the phases of the moon, and the moon is his eye. The pillar that supports the sky runs through the 7 strings and flows through the boundaries of the 10 countries. With tangible things, carrying intangible instruments, return to the original one. Reciting the spell softly, the spiritual power around turned into a tide and continuously poured into Hecate's spirit. The 5th phase of the moon slowly condensed, and she did not feel the level that should exist in theory. This is normal. Although she has no priesthood, Hecate's essence is still a god and immortal existence. Rather than saying that she is using meditation to break through, it is better to say that she is pouring power into the empty container. Infusing this kind of power, which is different from divine power, but has endless changes. In a distant place, it seems that there is a spiritual life that has noticed the fluctuations here. It wants to get closer, and its intuition tells it that if it can devour the spirit of this unknown life, it can obtain an unimaginable transformation. But there is also a premonition in the dark that if it really dares to do so, it will only be completely wiped out of its existence. After hesitating for a while, it wandered for a long time and finally overcame its instinct and left here reluctantly. Some talent. In the air, under the light gray robe, the young god who was watching everything commented. Not all life can overcome instinct, especially those who have not yet wisdom. And the other party's inspiration is also very high and can vaguely perceive the existence of danger. Meditation. Interesting. Strong spirit, the dream-born will also be stronger. It's a pity that it seems that this kind of spiritual enhancement will also allow people to control their thoughts, even in dreams, not as random and disordered as other life. I really hope there will be more life on Earth. At this rate, I don't know how long it will take for my divine power to reach the upper limit. Shaking his head, the wings flashed and the figure disappeared. Hecate continued his meditation without realizing it. With her potential, this breakthrough is not difficult. She can step over the natural chasm in the eyes of mortals in later generations by just raising her legs. So, without any ripples, the spirit body became stronger and stronger, and the essence of magic power improved accordingly. Hecate successfully took this step and became the first legendary wizard of chaos. The next morning, when the sun rose and shone on the red skirt, Hecate gradually woke up from meditation. She opened her eyes, gently moved her fingertips, and the pendant on the table floated up. This time, she did not use any magic power, but only the effect of pure mental power. Spirit is not equal to soul, it is the external power of the soul. A strong soul only means that there is a strong potential in the spiritual field, just like priesthood and divine power. However, compared with priesthood, there are still many ways for the soul to be slowly strengthened. And the spirit directly interferes with matter without magic as a medium. This is one of the most basic characteristics of legendary wizard. This means that the mental power has completed an essential transformation, which is also the origin of the name supernormal. Transcendence of the mundane is naturally called supernormal. Is this what it feels like to be extraordinary, or legend? Whispering softly, in Hecate's perception, there are many more things that she couldn't see clearly before. That is the manifestation of the law. In the past, because of the nature of God, she could actually see it all the time. But until today, she clearly felt that she could not only see but also touch. You succeeded. The handwriting slowly emerged on the surface of the stone slab, immediately attracting Hecate's attention. Of course, what level? I don't feel it at all. She snorted lightly, a little proud, but then she remembered something and fell silent again. After hesitating for a while, she whispered, "Since I have broken through the extraordinary and become a legendary wizard, can I beat the god now? If it is a regional god, you can try. But the true god, even the weakest, is far beyond your reach." There is no concealment, the handwriting on the stone slab has always been so direct. Is that so? After brushing off the non-existent dust on her red dress, Hecate sat on the bed. Not long after picking up this mysterious slate, she realized that it was harmless to her, at least for now, so she asked it about her long-standing confusion. Who am I, where did I come from, and why am I here? Then the slate pulled her into her memory, and she personally experienced the scene decades ago. As a new god, Hecate was not born knowing everything, but that didn't mean she had no memory of her birth. It was just like the mortals of later generations. Those memories had no special way to be remembered, and would only exist forever in the depths of their minds. But in front of the authority of memory itself, all problems were not problems. Throw her into the abyss, shame on the gods. As the father of the god of sin, I apologize. And the two goddesses that she saw at first sight when she was born, who were full of expectations, but soon turned into disappointment and boredom. All of these appeared in front of Hecate one by one, as if she had experienced them again. So what do you want to do with them? Imprison them, torture them, make them regret abandoning you? The handwriting appeared again, but Hecate shook her head. I don't know. Actually, apart from the goddess who wanted to throw me into the abyss and the nominal father, I don't hate anyone else. If I must say, I want to have the same powerful power as them first, and then think about the follow-up. As she said, it is not difficult to accept that she wants to stay away from her because she thinks that her existence has brought disaster to them. At most, because of the other party's abandonment, she will have nothing to do with them from now on. But after learning about the existence of Tartarus from the stone tablet, Hecate began to hate the goddess of light, Phoebe, her nominal grandmother. And Perseus, the god of destruction, this so-called father, made her dislike him even more. But I have thought of one thing. I want to make that god king regret his decision, she said. It's not that he expelled me from the Titans, but that the Titans are not qualified to accommodate my existence. That's a bit difficult, after all, he is a god king. So do you have a way? Looking at the stone tablet, Hecate asked. Yes, but it's not that easy. Even now, you only have the qualifications to start the first step. Only gods can fight against gods, or at least in the current world, there is no wisdom other than gods that can threaten them. So, if you want to master the power to fight against gods, you have to find a way to become one of them first. Become one of them? Ah, I should have been one of them. Hooking the corners of her mouth as if smiling, Hecate stroked her hair and continued to ask. Then what should I do? It should be difficult to become a true god by meditation alone. Yes, the reason why gods are gods is that they control power and control part of the world. Simple meditation is meaningless. The only way you want to get the priesthood is to create one yourself. Create one. Yes, create one, it belongs to you, a product created by you bit by bit. When it covers the sky, covers the earth, and penetrates the four seas, when it becomes an indispensable part of all spirits as its creator, you will have the power to fight against any titan god. But you can't do these things by staying here. You need to travel to every corner of the world and use your spirit to experience the flow of elements and the changes of laws. I understand. Hecate laughed. So, is this also your purpose? She remembered a story that the slate once told her, a story about a little girl and a diary. The content of the story is not important. What is important is that it warns others that unless you can see where something thinks, never believe in an intelligent existence. Of course, this is exactly why I came to you. You have this potential, a potential beyond your imagination. But as usual, the slate answered without any cover-up. But if you refuse, I can also think of other ways for you. Okay, I'll listen to you. Without hesitation, Hecate nodded. She rolled up her red hair, and then snapped her fingers. Everything in the wooden house seemed to have life, jumping into her pocket. The palm-sized pocket seemed to be a bottomless pit. Even if everything other than furniture was put in, there was no sign of it being full. After packing up the things, Hecate clasped her hands. An invisible wave enveloped the hut and the nearby open space, hiding its traces. Finally, she picked up the slate and said with a smile. Slate, you are too eye-catching like this, how about changing it? Turn into a book, can you change it? There was no response, but the slate changed its shape visibly. After a few seconds, it turned into a book of unknown material. This time, this book really looked like a book and it felt like paper, not like its brother, which was like a bronze ornament. Very good, Hecate smiled with satisfaction and held the book in her arms. Now, you are the treasure of me, the great wizard Hecate. From now on, you will be called the complete book of all laws. Without any hesitation, the wind elements around her responded to Hecate's call and lifted her body into the air. Hecate had no attachment to this place where she had lived for a long time. She just took a last look and then flew away. The stone slab asked her to leave, but did not say where to go. She heard that the edge of the continent was the sea, and she wanted to see it with her own eyes. The world is so big, she wants to verify for herself whether the stories are true or not. Hecate left, and the golden human didn't notice her departure at all. But in a place she didn't know, on the sacred mountain, the eyes of the king of gods followed her back as she left. He stretched out his hand again, but sensing the breath getting closer and closer, he finally put his hand down. Things in the starry sky are indeed difficult to deal with without the help of Kuz, the god of the sky. But if there is another helper, things may be easier than he expected. Chapter 77 Congratulations. Standing in the sky, wrapped in a brand new black robe, Ryan watched Hecate's figure going away. Thousands of years ago, before the spiritual world was opened up, he talked to Kronos in the underworld about 3 conditions. The origin of time and space became the foundation of the spiritual world. The concept of the moon made this feminine symbol that was born to fit the spiritual world become a part of Ryan. But the last requirement, the net that was expected to control the elements, Ryan seemed to have forgotten it and hesitated to do it. It's not that he can't do it. In fact, if he does it himself, at most 1 or 2 months, the elemental network that spreads throughout Chaos's world can be woven by him, but this actually doesn't mean anything to him. Just like many human priests now, even if the current magic net is born, it is just a tool for sorting out the elemental power in the world. Without enough users and strong enough source power to fill it, the so-called magic net can only support a weak god at most. Ryan doesn't know how much power of this level he has, but he just doesn't have enough carriers. Although the magic net is a bit special, there is no need to do it yourself. He is the master of the spirit world, not a worker in the spirit world. With Hecate's current progress, when she accumulates enough and uses the power of the spirit world to weave the magic net into shape, the 3rd era will almost arrive. When humans who can reproduce appear in large numbers, it is the time for the magic net to show its existence. As its status in history and civilization becomes higher and higher, and as the gods also begin to use it, it can be based on the spirit world and deeply rooted in the roots of the present world, becoming an indispensable part of chaos. At that time, as the Weaver, the first god of magic net, it is time for Hecate to show her skills. Even Ryan himself is not clear about what kind of power the magic net will have after it develops to the peak. He is looking forward to it. Of course, the original version of the magic net is probably different from the one in Ryan's memory. What he needs is not a mage, but a wizard. The so-called spell position probably will not appear in the first magic net. There is no such thing as a spell model now, because Ryan himself does not know this thing. It is not that it cannot be created, but that there is no need to create it. For a thing, it is better to let it grow wildly first, and then set rules when it blooms. Moreover, to let mortals ascend to gods, he only needs to grant them the divine position. But Ryan does not know how to achieve it by relying on mortals to ascend to gods. The so-called 7-phase meditation method, the current version also stops at touching divinity and having a long life. Ryan is not even clear about what the state of the real demigod is. This kind of demigod is not the 3,000 dream evil spirits accompanied by the god of sleep Hypnos, or the son of Zeus in later generations, who relied on a set of artifacts to barely beat the sea monster. Perseus, but like Hercules before he was deified, although he will die, he is enough to compete with the true god. He could even temporarily support the sky on behalf of Atlas, the giant god of the sky. Even the gods could not match such power. A person's wisdom is limited after all. I don't know if those great Greek sages will appear as promised in the distant future. When these top wise men and human beings have the opportunity to personally contact extraordinary power, what will they bring to this world? With some expectations in his heart, Ryan did not stay any longer, but looked in the direction of Mount Odylus. He didn't care, but if he stayed any longer, Kronos might not be able to bear it. If it weren't for him, if any other god dared to contact Hecate, who was regarded as a symbol of heaven's punishment by the god king, he would have been beaten by the other party. Really impatient. Shaking his head, Ryan took a step forward and disappeared silently on the spot. In the flash of space, Ryan came to the halfway up Mount Odylus. As far as the eye can see, it is green, but a little empty. Faintly, the sound of creatures fighting came. That was the nymph fairy who lived in the sacred mountain. It has changed a lot, he commented softly, and his powerful spiritual sense allowed Ryan to sense that as he disappeared and reappeared, the eyes on the sacred mountain were faintly locked on him. But since he was already here, he was not in a hurry to go up, but walked slowly to the top of the mountain under the eyes of the other party, looking at the scenery of the sacred mountain that had changed a lot. When Themis made laws, Ryan only walked on the top of the mountain once, so strictly speaking, the last time he came was when Uranus had just ascended the throne. Compared with the past, there are more stone roads on the sacred mountain now, and beautiful nymphs shuttled through the woods. The plants in the mountains have also changed a lot. They are no longer the original batch of plants. In addition to satisfying the desire for food, they are no longer useful to the gods. Going up along the mountain road, Ryan obviously did not hide his figure, but all the creatures turned a blind eye to him. But Kronos is always different. He is the god king and also has the ministry of time and space, so when Ryan stepped onto the top of the mountain, his eyes were looking at where he was. Long time no see, Kronos. Ryan nodded and greeted him like an old friend. I took Hecate away. But since you have expelled her from the Titan clan, I think you won't care about this little thing, right? It's the Titans, Ryan. Kronos seemed to twitch his mouth, but it was only fleeting. It's all the same. Walking forward, he stood shoulder to shoulder with Kronos. Ryan found that this position was indeed good. Just like when he was overlooking the 7 realms from Mount Sinai as the highest mountain in the world and the land closest to the sky, standing here, he had a feeling that everything was in his hands. Some things are meaningless if only you agree with them. Only when everyone agrees with them, they really exist. It seemed that he was talking about the title of Titan, but Kronos knew that Ryan was actually referring to his position as the King of Gods. The King of Gods recognized by only a few gods is not considered the King of Gods. Only those recognized by all gods are considered the King of Gods. Hecate is the daughter of original sin who was punished by the world. Her birth caused the imbalance of the starry sky. Not wanting to argue about the victory or defeat of words, Kronos said. You can take her away, of course, but you also have to contribute to the situation of the starry sky. Hyperion also offended you. Although he paid a price for it, everyone knows that if there is a chance, he will definitely retaliate. As long as you stand on my side, I will not only stop pursuing Hecate's affairs, but I can even hand over some star fields to the star gods under your command after the dispute over the ownership of the starry sky is over." He turned around and looked directly at Ryan. Compared to other titans, Kronos is not the tallest one, but as a king, he has become more and more qualified. They are all true gods belonging to the starry sky, and they can draw power from the starry sky like the sea god occupies the ownerless sea. I just want them not to resist my rule, and everything else is up to you. You also invited other people, such as Ether, the god of light in the underworld? Ryan asked with a smile without rushing to reply. Yes. Kronos nodded and said, and the goddess of daylight Hemera. They have always been inseparable. The world is getting bigger and bigger, and there are more and more star fields in the starry sky. As long as they obey my rule, I don't care who they belong to. I understand, so minus. After thinking for a while, Ryan said, can't you delay it anymore? Looking at Kronos' suddenly changed face, Ryan smiled and blessed. It seems that your offspring will be born in 1,000 years at most. Congratulations in advance, Kronos. Since you need my help, then take it as a gift of congratulations in advance. Chapter 78 Transaction. Sometimes, I really don't want to communicate with a god like you. Taking a deep breath, Kronos' expression quickly returned to normal. Ryan was not the first to know about his move to recruit helpers. In other words, most of the gods on his side know this. But except for his divine queen, everyone thought that the divine king was unwilling to fail, so he did this kind of thing by promising benefits everywhere. But now Ryan could see at a glance that the real reason why he did this was because his son of God was about to be born. If he couldn't win the starry sky now, he might not have time to think about it later. Nothing difficult to guess, Kronos, as you always do. From when you used words to deceive your father, to when everything was ready, you had the courage to take the sickle. When you have a choice, you always want the best, but if you don't have a choice, you don't mind taking a gamble. Ryan shook his head and felt a little emotional. At this point, he felt like he had some similarities. Maybe, but I feel a lot more relieved now. Smiling a little, Kronos seemed to relax a little. It seems that my first child is a goddess. At least she won't be the one who threatens my throne. How to say? Perhaps because we have interacted with you more, I know you better. If the God King is about to change his position again, you will never discuss the starry sky with me, right? Some were speechless, but Kronos was telling the truth. I don't know if it's his own influence, but Ryan always feels that compared to the myth, Kronos is much more intelligent now. Okay, let's not waste any more time. I guess you're not too interested in my sacred mountain either. Stretching out his hand under the influence of divine power, a star map appeared in the hands of the God King. Hundreds of light spots, large and small, with varying brightness and darkness appeared on it, each representing a star field. Just like the sea area, the star area is the standard for dividing the starry sky. You have 12 star gods under your command, and they also have a leader, right? Kronos ran his palm across the star map and said slowly, except for the core of the starry sky, you can choose the others. It doesn't matter if you even have a few more. Ryan asked casually as he glanced at the star map. Then what do you want, Eclipse? Integrated with solar eclipse, it is indeed much more powerful than before. It works really well in the sun, but only in the sun. I know, so in addition to Sun Eater, there is also creation code I need to borrow it. The goddess of light is blocked by her goddess and the god of weather, Cleos. Compared to the sun god Hyperion, Kronos does not intend to do anything to the mother of light. A balanced starry sky is what he wants, not to mention sealing a sun god. The God King will already feel the pain of the price he has to pay in advance. If he adds a powerful mother of light, his power as a God King will increase. It won't be much greater than consumption. I needed to open a seal. Even though Hyperion's power is no longer strong as the sun god with 2 priesthoods, the origin of the sun as a celestial body continues unabated. Nodding, Ryan understood Kronos' thoughts. Just like the sea, although the original sea god Pontos once lost his strength due to the split in the priesthood, the power of the ocean and water in the entire world is increasing day by day, and the same is true for the sun. As the supreme celestial body in the starry sky, relying on the seal it has laid, even in existence with divine power level 20 cannot easily break it, not to mention that Kronos is still just a little bit behind. But the matter of imprisoning the sun god with the sun itself is against the order. If there is the creation code, the God King can easily release Helios. With another sun god in hand, there is a real possibility of victory in this battle for the stars. Otherwise, even if Hyperion is defeated, the God King will not be able to do anything to him when facing the ownerless sun. Okay, I can lend you the artifact, but these star fields are not needed for the time being. On Cronus' star map, there are hundreds of large and small star fields, but the core area surrounding the sun and moon is the essence of the starry sky, and it is also the category of the starry sky at the beginning of the world. Those remote places are areas that continue to extend as the world expands. There, the energy tide surges, and all kinds of remote and dangerous places abound. Although it is not very dangerous to the gods, it does not bring much help to the star gods who control the star field. It will take at least thousands of years to transform those places into an excellent territory bit by bit. Ryan saw through Cronus' idea of killing two birds with one stone at a glance. When he gave these star fields to others, he also asked them to help manage the starry sky. Anyway, as the God King, even if those places are not under his actual control, as long as they are changed because of him, he can increase his own power. When the dispute in the starry sky is over, if you still need my help, let's talk about the issue of the starry domain. Looking at the orbits of celestial bodies on the star map, Ryan reached out and made a move. The next moment, there was a turbulence in the space, the brass book fell into the palm, and then flew towards the God King. What you want? Well, if the day comes, I will. He reached out and took it, feeling that the artifact was extremely consistent with his own divine authority, and the God King agreed. But, what about Sun Eater? No hurry. Ryan shook his head, it has no wisdom. Once it leaves my side, I'm afraid it won't obey your orders. Let it stay in the spirit world first. When you need it, use the code to activate the power of the spirit world, and it will naturally appear. But, finally looking at the east, Ryan said with a smile, you must remember to put it at the right time. If you call it out in advance, it may not be able to distinguish between enemies and friends. I will. Nodding in agreement, Kronos quickly found the special page in the artifact. Seeing that the matter was over, Ryan also waved his hand. Today's goal has been achieved, and he doesn't plan to stay any longer. Everything is done, so I won't stay any longer. I wish you success, Kronos. The light gate emerged and Ryan's figure disappeared on the spot after taking a step. On the sacred mountain, looking at the place where Ryan left, the king of gods did not rush back, but stood for a while. Through the incident with Hecate, Kronos has a better understanding of humans and gods. He didn't notice faith, but he found some other problems. If humans can have free will and soul, then do they have some potential to be noticed by the Lord of the world like Hecate? If so, then Ryan's previous focus on human knowledge can be explained. Maybe the other party wanted to create some people with enough potential, but unfortunately the golden humans disappointed him. Open up the world. Maybe this is the secret of granting priesthood. In addition to the corresponding power, do you need someone who can bear the power? Perseus, the god of destruction, I don't know if you will be taught a lesson by your daughter in the future. That's good, it's just right to use this as the price for your arrogance and rudeness. Shaking his head, the God King stopped thinking and poured his power into the brass book in his hand, carefully sensing this top-level holy object of 3-point. Unlike the stone sickle, although both are still in the realm of high-level artifacts in terms of level, when he really held it in his hand, Kronos immediately noticed the difference between the two. The artifacts born in the sky are completely different from those born after birth. Unlike the sickle, it does not have various restrictions on the objects of use. And the most important thing is that the brass book is only 1/3 of the complete artifact, and it has more hidden power. Part of the artifact of creation, even this part alone, is very close to that step. The authority of order. If this is my artifact, even if its greatest function is not fighting, when it is combined with the power of the God King, I can have 70% of the power that the Father God once had. Uranus is the one who can truly compete with or even defeat the personified primordial god, and Kronos is very clear about this. Even if he hasn't taken that step yet, the ordinary divine power level 20 is only 30% of his strength. Sky, the authority of the God King, and the symbol of patriarchy, each of the three is faintly half a step forward from the peak of powerful divine power, and Kronos has not even achieved 1/3 of his strength yet. He was a little envious, but looking at the brass book, Kronos did not think of taking it for himself. After all, he can now feel that this artifact is very similar to the companion artifact, and its owner can make it silent at any time. It's just an artifact. I may not have a better one in the future. Soon, when the starry sky is used by me, the mountains will bow to me. With a cold smile, Kronos thought of his original elder brother. Ocean Lord Oceanus, his power has completely overwhelmed the ancient sea god Pontus. If nothing unexpected happens, he will be the final winner in this battle for the sea. No one knows whether the expanding ocean god system will have other ideas. So after solving the starry sky, Kronos' next target of suppression will be him. Chapter 79 Lord. Since the God King obtained the artifact, another 700 years have passed in the Chaos world. Thousands of years have passed since the birth of mankind. Gradually, even the lives of the Golden Age have gradually reached the end allowed by fate. When their bodies decay, the souls jump out of the flesh, carrying the knowledge and experience gained in their long lives, and return to the spiritual world according to the guidance of the dark. The soul and the body influence each other. Although these lives in the Golden Age are primitive in structure, they are particularly favored by the gods. Many of them have come into contact with more than one god, so they are infected by the power of the gods, and these spirits have become strange. Just as the creations of the Golden Age are more long-lived than the lives of later generations, their souls are the same. If the lifespan of the soul of ordinary things is 7 or 8 times to dozens of times that of the flesh, it can be foreseen that the spirits of these Golden Age lives have a long time of hundreds of thousands of years. Even if the spirits of the golden humans had not come to the spirit world, Ryan had no doubt that the souls infected by the divine power would not only not dissipate, but would wander on the earth and the sky, turning into a kind of life like a heroic spirit. Then in the era of Zeus, along with other relics of the Second Age, they were wiped out by the new God King with a wave of his hand. In addition to lifespan, the spirits of the Golden Age often have extraordinary power under the influence of divine power. This power is not obvious in the material world, but it is magnified in the spirit world. Relying on this power, most of them crossed the surface of the spirit world in a very short time and entered the dream spirit world, which had already taken shape. There they instinctively absorbed scattered spiritual power to further strengthen their souls, or fought with the spirits born naturally in the dream spirit world and devoured each other. There were even many who obtained memory fragments of other spirits in this process, gradually awakened wisdom, and knew how to think. So as time passed, in the 3-layer spirit world, a special social structure composed of spiritual life was born. Some powerful spirits selected some dream fragments, infected them with their own power, and then continued to expand their power and scope. When they grew to a certain extent, these large dream domains were noticed by the 3rd-level spirit world itself and finally fed back to Ryan. When Ryan discovered this behavior, he was a little angry at first. This behavior is tantamount to creating a world within a world. Only the instinctive laws of the world have issued a reward for this, let alone Ryan, who has subjective thinking. But later, he gradually discovered that although these unique dream domains are controlled by their founders, the first authority still belongs to the spirit world. They are different from Ryan. Their existence itself comes from spiritual power, not external sources. So Ryan not only did not punish them, but recognized their ownership of their dream domain in the name of the Lord of the spirit world. Just like the angels of the spirit world before obtaining the priesthood, the gods of stars, rivers, mountains and lakes, these spiritual beings have transformed into gods with domains. They are not innate gods, so they are immortal, but not immortal. They have no priesthood, but the dream realm they control is where their divine power lies. The wider the scope of the dream realm, the greater the proportion in the 3rd-level spiritual world, and the stronger their power. As more and more of these dream realms are born, the internal circulation of the spiritual world has also been strengthened. For intelligent life, desire is the ladder of progress. In order to become stronger, they can always think of some methods that even Ryan feels surprised and better manage their dream world. So Ryan is not stingy with rewards for those who are outstanding. He wrote new rules into the laws of the interface. If a life can contribute to the development of the spiritual world, the power of the interface will tilt towards it. After feeling the response of the spiritual world, these original Dream Realm pioneers were encouraged. They proudly called themselves spiritual world lords and advertised themselves as agents selected by the great and ancient spiritual world will, and they are noble beings in the interface second only to the spiritual world angels. Ryan laughed it off. The spiritual world is developing, and the outside world is also changing. Unconsciously, the sun god had taken back nearly half of the starry sky, but the battlefield was gradually moving away from the sun. In such an environment, one day 700 years later, the war to determine the ownership of the starry sky broke out in the depths of the starry sky. In the depths of the starry sky, tens of thousands of star gods were on both sides. In the battlefield of the true gods, the existence value of the gods is greater than the actual value. As part of the starry sky, they gathered here, which means that the gods of both sides can be blessed by the half of the starry sky they control. In the middle of the battlefield, in the dark and cold void, several figures larger than celestial bodies collided with each other, just like the past 1,000 years. In this place where the laws of matter are weaker, they unfold their bodies and fight like the giant gods in mythology. Or, the giant gods in later mythology are just images left by the Titan gods. Light minus minus. A light shout, that is Thea, the mother of light. As every time in the past, the empty starry sky became brighter. Starlight and sunlight merged, and under the divine power, they turned into a gorgeous ribbon. It crossed the void and passed through the body of the Queen of Gods, but did not touch any entity. This is a barrier at the time level. Without special authority or artifacts, almost no god can harm the goddess in the past time. But Thea didn't care, because this was a war about the sovereignty of the starry sky, not a duel between her and the Queen of Gods. The ribbon that swept to the back was instantly broken, turning into silk threads all over the sky, covering hundreds of star gods and Atlas, the leader. With just a slight collision, their divine bodies were torn into pieces, and a huge wound was left on the body of the god of strength. Jung. In silence, a stone sickle covered with blood-colored lines emerged behind Thea. In front of it, the light band surrounding the goddess of light seemed to be non-existent, and was easily cut, leaving a long blood mark on her arm. Her eyebrows were slightly wrinkled, and the seemingly shallow blood marks could not heal under the power of God. This was not the first time, so the goddess of light did not care about the wound on her body at all, but just punched the side of the sickle with a backhand punch. The goddess's slender arms did not look strong, but the Queen of Gods Rhea retreated several steps under the blow, and her face showed an abnormal flush. The priesthood of the passage of time is not good at fighting. The power of light is nearly doubled in the presence of sun, even though Rhea, as the Queen of Gods, is actually a little stronger than the Mother of Light. The situation of the battle is completely opposite. Without the help of the three oak goddesses and Atlas, and without relying on the artifact, she can't even delay the opponent's offensive. However, compared with the relatively friendly fight between the two goddesses, the battlefield between the sun god Hyperion and the weather god Creus on the other side is another scene. The sun has always been violent and blazing, especially Hyperion. Even compared to his own wife, the sun god is not only ruthless to the enemy, but even his own people are still not taken seriously by him. Chapter 80 Breaking the Seal. Bang! Just as the two goddesses were fighting, in the distant starry sky, the battle between the weather god Creus and the sun god Hyperion was also going on. But unlike Thea's restraint, her husband was never a soft-hearted person. Facing his actual grandson, the east wind god Oros crossed half of the battlefield under the blow of the sun god, flashed by the side of the sky like god Ether, and crashed directly into a small celestial body. The difference in divine power made Oros unable to even turn into invisible wind to avoid damage. Under his impact, the body of a certain star god was instantly shattered. Accompanied by a scream, a star god standing on the side of the sun god suddenly emitted light all over his body, then gradually faded and finally turned into a shining stone. In contrast, the east wind god just shook his dizzy head and crawled out of the broken celestial body. Seeing this, all the star gods on both sides of the battlefield couldn't help but feel a sense of grief for the death of the rabbit and the fox. This situation is not the first time that it has happened. Other true gods will at least distinguish between enemies and friends, but the sun god never cares about the existence of the star gods. However, despite this, the star gods still dare not leave. This is the limitation of the regional gods. They are also innate gods, so they are immortal, but unlike true gods, they cannot obtain divine power from their priesthood continuously. When the region on which they rely is destroyed, they will permanently lose the source of divine power, and the end of the exhaustion of divine power is eternal sleep. If there is no other way to obtain divine power in the future, this star god will probably remain in this state between life and death forever and will never come back. This is the case with the Father of Heaven. As the Lord of the Sky, even if he loses the throne of the God King, the priesthood of Sky will continue to provide him with divine power. But in order to avoid that terrible change, Uranus had to use every bit of newly born divine power to resist that change, and the consequence was that he was forced to fall into a long sleep when his divine power dried up. In the past 1,000 years, there have been countless star gods who have slept forever. Even on Earth, there are countless gods of mountains, rivers, and lakes who have fallen into this state that is no different from death, but no true god cares about this. In their eyes, these gods without divine duties are no different from mortals and nymphs who have been given divinity. Mortals can be killed, and eternal sleep is not much different from death for gods. The gods who can be killed by just destroying a celestial body have the same status among the gods as Ryan's heavenly soldiers and generals in his previous life. Although they are also immortals in theory, everyone has always called them heavenly soldiers and generals instead of their own names. Why struggle, my brother? You are not my opponent. I heard that you and your child also fell out. Then we are really suffering from the same disease, ha 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 ha. In the laughter, Hyperion looked at the god of weather who was constantly dodging, and his body, like a body cast in gold, rushed directly towards the formation formed by the star gods. The battle between true gods can easily determine who is better, but if one side delays the battle, it is common to fight for several years or even decades unless the gap is too big. Instead of wasting his energy on Creus, Hyperion might as well kill more of his rebellious descendants. They dared to betray him and stand on the side of the god king to fight against him. This is simply unforgivable. Thinking of this, the sun god shouted loudly, letting his voice echo in the star space. Astras, star gods, this is the consequence of your wavering. And you too. Creus, Rhea, you can't do it, let Kronos come in person. The humiliation of being forced to confess by Ryan, the grievance of having his wife held by Creus, and the frustration of having to fight two alone and the anger of retreating step by step for thousands of years have all been vented by Hyperion on his enemies in recent years, and the star gods are the top priority. He knew that even if he took back the starry sky, he would not be able to do anything to the Queen of Gods and the powerful god of weather. But he swore that when the time came, he would send all the star gods who had betrayed him to eternal sleep one by one. It's almost time, Hyperion, I really hope you can still laugh. Later. Resisting the anger in his heart, Creus did not want to delay for the sake of the star gods. Anyway, everything was about to end, and he did not care about the life and death of these regional gods. It was just that the god king would have a headache for a while after the war. After all, the years of god wars had made the energy tide of the starry sky chaotic. If there were no star gods, the true gods would have to solve the problem themselves. Boom. The powerful god of weather chose to avoid, and the god of skylight and the goddess of daylight with medium divine power also avoided. They just wanted to gain a territory in the starry sky and stay away from those stupid brothers and sisters in the underworld, instead of really coming to fight for the god king. So the sun god, who had no opponent, killed the star gods and other weak true gods. The three wind gods turned into air currents, but they were still torn and separated under the light and heat. Prometheus, the creator of the bronze humans in later generations, was used as a weapon to smash one star after another. But several powerful true gods turned a blind eye to this. In this silent tacit understanding, time passed by minute by minute. Until one moment, Hyperion, who was attacking wantonly, suddenly stopped. He looked back at the sun and in that direction, he vaguely sensed that the seal he had left behind was touched. That was the seal he used to imprison his eldest son Helios. The seal was with the sun, and even the peak of powerful divine power could not do anything about the shackles. The gods controlled the priesthood, but they were not equal to the things represented by the priesthood. Even the original gods were no longer equal to their original bodies after being personified, let alone the Titan gods who were born later. It was well known that the power of the sun was far stronger than that of the sun god, so Hyperion had never worried that his eldest son would escape from the imprisonment. But just now, reality told him that nothing was impossible. Under a powerful force of order, the seal was pierced from the inside. The decree of the god king under the blessing of the code of creation was almost as effective as his words. The seal left by Hyperion did not last long and fell apart in a tremor. Kronos, it's you. It was unbelievable, but it was natural. Kronos still maintained restraint and did not do it himself, but the decree of the god king that he had prepared for a long time in advance was not compromised at all. Except for Ryan when he was in the spirit world, there are only two gods in the world who have a high affinity with the code of creation, one is Themis, and the other is the god king. His authority can naturally be greatly enhanced by order and law in the hands of Kronos. The power of this artifact is much more terrible than his sickle that once hurt the father. Good, very good, is this your purpose? Laughing in anger, Hyperion's divine power suddenly erupted and the surrounding celestial bodies shattered one after another. Although in the same field, the oppression of the strong on the weak will be more obvious, but once Helios escapes, he can still interfere with his control of the sun. It's useless. Unless he does it himself, even if you bring that rebellious son with you, you are no match for me. Since you dare to do this, then prepare to face my power. Chapter 81 Sunset. The voice of the sun god echoed in the space. He said so and did so. He no longer set his target on the star god. Hyperion looked at the weather god. He planned to teach his brother a long-lasting lesson and let him remember the pain brought by the sun. Really? What about this? A faint voice came from afar. It was the Queen of Gods, Rhea. At some point, with the help of the special power, Rhea temporarily got rid of the Mother of Light, and the price was that the other true gods around her were used as targets. However, unlike her husband, the goddess of light Thea did not deliberately attack those celestial bodies. On the contrary, she avoided them. With his eyes narrowed, Hyperion didn't know what tricks the other party was playing, but he still looked over. In the palm of the Queen of Gods, a small page of book was shining. Is that Minos? It looked familiar, but Hyperion didn't recognize it after all. But even though he didn't remember what it was, he became cautious. Haha, it's nothing, my good brother, that's your old friend. The chest injury slowly recovered under the effect of divine power, and Creus finally smiled. It was reasonable that the God King did not give him the most critical task, but as a powerful divine power, the god of weather still knew what it was in advance. Looking at Creus, Rhea did not speak like him. She just ignited the pages of the book with divine power, and then hid in the cracks of time again, turning to face the Mother of Light. Time was under Hyperion's nervous and puzzled gaze, and a bad premonition rose in his heart. Remember, the last time I had this feeling was. Buzz minus minus. A noisy sound rang in my ears, as if thousands of lives were playing strange notes in my ears. Hyperion's face suddenly changed, and at the corner of his sight, a wisp of invisible black mist seeped out from the void, and the disgust from the soul surged in the heart of the sun god. Is it? You again, damned monster. In shock and anger, Hyperion retreated violently, but it was meaningless. Eclipse was invisible and shapeless, but it was everywhere. In a flash, it stuck to the body of the sun god, constantly absorbing and eroding his divine power. Compared with the last time, the ancient evil creature with medium divine power was even more powerful. Hyperion's power could no longer tear its gathering and dispersing divine body. At most it would cause a few ripples, and then return to its original state. Creus, do it. In the distance, the Queen of Gods said calmly. According to Kronos' arrangement, he could not directly attack the Titans, but he could rescue the trapped Helios from a distance. The sun god was left to the unintelligent sun devourer to deal with, while the Queen of Gods and the god of weather were only responsible for stopping the Mother of Light Thea. Although she and Creus were two people, when light and the sun were in the same place, their power was greatly enhanced. For Rhea, the whole task was to stop her sister until Hyperion was defeated by his nemesis. After all, the God King had no intention of doing anything to Hyperion. He could not imprison the symbol of the sun itself in the abyss outside the world. Defeating him like he imprisoned Helios before, letting another sun god replace him, and then using the power of the God King to imprison him under the God Mountain or in the underworld, this was the limit of what Kronos could do. At least now, the God King thought so. Get out of the way. Buzz. It seemed like a long time had passed, but in fact, from the appearance of Eclipse to the Queen of Gods calling the God of Weather, it was only a moment in between. The originally relaxed Thea suddenly found that the battle situation was out of control. The monster that once obscured the sun appeared in the starry sky again. The ribbon formed by the brilliance changed from 1 to 10,000, and it was uncertain whether it was real or not, and it crashed straight into the two Titan gods. The frenzied storm blocked the ribbon, and they collapsed at the first touch, but then more. Storms were pulled out from the passing time, continuously hindering Thea's attack. Rhea, do you want to destroy the sun? How dare you let that monster attack him? Thea shouted angrily, which was a little difficult to understand. She and Rhea were both goddesses, and she had only suppressed them before, but had not really let go. Otherwise, although the Queen of Gods had the artifact in her hand, the star gods around her might not be much stronger than those on the other side. On the one hand, Thea thought she had a sure win, and on the other hand, compared to her husband, she was more or less rational. Star gods have always been subject to the rule of whoever the star field where their body belongs to. When the starry sky is recovered, these star gods will still be their subordinates. They have suffered too much loss. Do they have to stabilize the starry sky themselves? But she never expected that the other party would actually release the monster that had swallowed the origin of the sun before. Destroying the sun for the sake of the ownership of the starry sky will not only not increase the power of the God King, but will also be backlashed by the world. You worry too much, sister. Shaking her head, Rhea did not stop the movement of her hands. She borrowed power from the past to keep the power of the god of weather at its peak. Although her direct combat power is not strong as the Queen of Gods, Rhea is still very commendable in terms of assistance. You have noticed that the power of Sun Devourer has become stronger, but it is also rejected by the laws of the world. The longer it stays, the stronger the suppression it receives. It cannot stay here forever. Besides, Kronos has no intention of doing anything to you and your wife. As long as your son and husband swap positions and let him come to the sacred mountain as a guest or live in the underworld forever, the star god will still respect you as the mother of light. Hyperion imprisoned your eldest son. Don't you have any dissatisfaction with him? Light. The Queen of Gods responded with a stronger fluctuation of divine power. Obviously, Thea was not shaken by a few words. Hyperion's behavior of imprisoning his eldest son did make Thea dissatisfied, but it was just a little contradictory. After all, the sun god is not the father of heaven, and his actions are not enough to make his wife alienated. However, the Queen of Gods' explanation finally made her feel a little relieved. As long as there is no problem with the sun, everything will be fine. In an instant, with Thea's full strength burst, all the gods on the side of the King of Gods on the field could not help but blacken their eyes. Few people remember that Thea is not only the mother of light, but also the god of vision. Under the influence of her authority, all enemies have lost the ability to observe the environment with their eyes. Even in the distance, the ancient evil is also affected by this power, but it does not rely on vision. As long as the perception of light and heat is still there, it can still move freely. Years. With a light shout, Rhea also mobilized her authority. She shared the passing time with every true god. Although they can only see the world of the last moment, it is enough to react. Hold her, it will be over soon. The light and the storm collided again, mixed with the power of other true gods. Ether, the god of skylight, who had been paddling, also made a full effort to interfere with the control of the goddess of light over light. However, just as the battle between the two sides became more and more intense, a bad premonition suddenly appeared in the hearts of the gods present. Thea turned his head and looked in the direction where Hyperion was hiding. He was already tightly wrapped in black fog. The sun god had foreseen his failure, but his face was not dark at the moment, but full of madness. Helios, Kronos, my dear son and brother, since you want the starry sky and the sun so much, I will give it to you. Looking at the black fog that he couldn't get rid of no matter what, Hyperion stopped struggling. He is the sun god, and the sun should have its own way of dying. You can take what you want, but the result will never be what you want. I will rule this starry sky, or watch it turn into a scorched earth. Chapter 82 Falling Stars. The voice of the sun god echoed in the starry space, and his eyes were fixed on all the gods present. His divine body began to burn and his divine power became unstable, but the faint sense of oppression became stronger and stronger. Not all gods can do this, but the sun can undoubtedly do it. So along with the madness of his master, the huge light body that dominated the starry sky also expanded. On the sacred mountain, the face of the god king who had just rescued Helios from a distance changed suddenly, and even Ryan, who was watching the battle in the spirit world, frowned. Perhaps because he often dealt with those gods who used their brains, even Ryan had forgotten that not all gods of chaos would calculate gains and losses. Any normal god would not do such a thing that harmed others and benefited himself. Especially since the gods are immortal, Hyperion's behavior not only affects the present, but will also continue to bring him negative effects in the long years to come. But he still did it, as if he didn't care about the consequences at all. Fortunately, although Ryan was the promoter of this mistake, he was not the one who paid the main price. It's just that for quite a long time in the future, the gods who divided the star field will have a headache. The god of chaos is really crazy. Even if it was not obvious before, I don't know when he will go crazy. Thinking of the Trojan War that swept the Olympus pantheon in the future and made the gods fight in the world, it was just because the goddess of discord did not receive an invitation to the banquet. Ryan felt that there was nothing incomprehensible about this. Now this is easy to say. If it were a more radical god, he might drag the sun to hit the sacred mountain. Sighing, Ryan waved his hand and called Esther, who was standing by. Be prepared, he said, if nothing unexpected happens, the area around the sun will be the most severely damaged. When you get there, it will take a lot of energy. Choose some from the spirits of the golden humans and use them to replace the star gods. It is barely feasible. Making arrangements silently, the goddess of starlight took the order and left. In the entire chaos world, there are not a few gods who were shocked by the changes in the starry sky. On the sea, watching the fire meteors falling to the earth, Oceanus, the god of the ocean, also stopped fighting with Pontus, the god of the primordial sea. The instantly rising power of the sun god made them all realize what Hyperion had done. Let's stop here, Pontus, they have already decided the winner. Oceanus said to his uncle. Although he could gain more if he continued to fight, the environment no longer allowed him to do so. From now on, the Lord of the Ocean planned to avoid Kronos' edge until his child was born. And if nothing unexpected happened, this time would not be too long. On the other side, Pontus, the god of the primordial sea, also looked up at the sky. Although he had been at a disadvantage before, he still gained something. Of course I can, but you, my nephew, when Kronos wins, you will be his next target. The voice of the primordial sea god was heavy, just like his original symbol, the concave surface of the earth. All three gods that Gaia had bred alone were like this. Uranus symbolizes the opposition of the earth, and then there is the sky. Pontus symbolizes the depression of the earth, and then there is the ocean. Uria is the bulge of the earth, which is finally called a mountain range. They were originally part of the earth, and then under the evolution of the world, this original material was divided. But you won't really stand on his side, right? After all, even his brother was forced to collapse his divine body by him. The blue-haired, tall and burly ocean lord spoke loudly. All the sea gods present heard his words. They didn't know what happened in the starry sky, but it was true. The Titans were merciless to each other, not to mention that the original sea god line did not belong to the Titans. Maybe, but I won't go against him, Oceanus. Let you Titans solve the Titans' affairs. Anyway, I have never thought about the position of the god king. Turning around, the original sea god greeted. He left this place with the true gods under his command and returned to his palace built on the seabed. Opposite him, the Lord of the Ocean did not stop him, but continued to watch the strange phenomenon in the sky. The expanding sun, the large number of collapsed celestial bodies, the thousands of star gods who lost their support in an instant and fell into eternal sleep, and the star rain that cut through the sky and fell to the earth, all of these formed a beautiful picture. But the gods all knew that hidden behind the beauty, something big must have happened in chaos's starry sky. However, the world is getting bigger and bigger now. Except for the gods with special power, there are few beings who can see through the world at a glance. So they can only silently watch the falling meteors like rain, and then make all kinds of guesses. In the starry sky, because of Hyperion's actions, the three powerful main gods also stopped their actions at the same time. Hyperion, are you crazy? Although he didn't take the star god seriously in his heart, the god of weather still couldn't understand it. The violent sun instantly shook the celestial bodies around it into dust, and those that were a little farther away also broke into pieces and fell into the world. If this was to deal with the enemy, Creus could understand it, but Hyperion actually destroyed the star gods on his side. After all, those who existed around the sun were beings that would never surrender to the god king. Isn't this obvious? The divine power was still burning, and even Eclipse, who was wandering around the sun god, was a little full for a while and separated from Hyperion for a distance. The somewhat embarrassed Titan ancient god sneered and looked into the distance, which was the direction where Helios fled. I lost, but not to you. If this rebellious son had not been born, as the only master of the sun, even Kronos could not defeat me in the starry sky. I know what he wants, and I also know that my eldest son is waiting to receive my inheritance, but I will not give him this opportunity. Losing 30% of the star field of the star god, the violent and uncontrollable supreme celestial body, this is the gift I left for him. And Kronos is different from me. I will only imprison him, but the king of gods only needs a son that has no power to resist and is under his control. After saying that, Hyperion finally glanced at the black fog around him. He did not look at his wife, because he could guess the other party's disappointed expression. He just mustered up his strength and exploded his body. As the god of the sun, Kronos did not dare to lock him in the abyss. But if he was sealed somewhere else, Hyperion would really have no chance of turning over. So he took advantage of the gap when the ancient evil devoured his shattered body, turned into a golden stream of light, and rushed towards the sun. At the same time, the furious sun also crashed straight into its master, and along the way, countless celestial bodies fell apart. In the distance, the queen of the gods stretched out her hand as if she wanted to stop it, but the goddess of light Thea stopped her. Although she could not understand her husband's behavior, Thea did not want Hyperion to be locked up in the sacred mountain. After all, in her heart, the status of the star god was just a useful tool. Whoosh! So in front of the gods, the golden light sank into the sun, although it returned to the symbol of his own divine position. This behavior of self-destruction of the divine body is more difficult to recover than normal injuries. If nothing unexpected happens, Hyperion will be unable to do anything for at least 1,000 years. With the return of the sun god, the supreme celestial body not only did not calm down, but became even more violent. Not far away, Helios, who had just escaped from captivity, hurried over. He looked at the turbulent sun and tried to calm it with his part of the divine power, but it was all in vain. "Let me do it." The time and space twisted into a tunnel and Kronos' voice came out from it. His goal was achieved, but what was left was a mess. The king of gods didn't know whether he should be happy or not.